Hey guys, tonight we're pulling back the silk curtain on one of the most misunderstood and romanticized figures in history, the geisha. Elegant, poised, mysterious. Yes, but also behind those painted smiles, a life shaped by sacrifice, secrecy, and survival. This isn't just about pretty kimonos and fans. This is about what it really meant to live as a geisha, what you gave up, what you gained, and what you were never allowed to want. And fair warning, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I like imagining us all drifting off across different time zones, wrapped up in the same strange dream. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through Gion at dusk. The cobblestones are slick with the remains of a summer rain, and the lanterns are beginning to glow like small captured suns, their red paper skins warm against the twilight. The wooden facades around you are centuries old, dark, silent, watching. You pause outside a tea house where music filters through a shoji screen door. Inside, laughter ripples over the tinkling notes of a shamisen. You're on the outside looking in. That's the first rule of the geisha world. Beauty is always something to be observed, never possessed. You step forward, and the door slides open. The smell hits first. Incense, tatami mats, expensive perfume. A woman bows low, her hair coiled into a lacquered sculpture, her white-painted face a mask of otherworldly calm. She's not just wearing a kimono, she is the kimono, stitched into the pattern of cranes and gold threads like she was born from silk and steam. She leads you in without speaking. That's the second rule. Words are used sparingly, always with precision. A geisha never rambles. She knows silence can be more seductive than sound. The room is dim, lit by candlelight and the soft orange haze of paper lamps. You settle in, cross-legged, on a cushion near a low table. Across from you, another geisha pours your sake. Her wrists are pale and delicate, her hands steady. Her eyes never quite meet yours, but not from shyness. No, she's calculating, reading you, measuring out exactly how much charm you're worth. This is a transaction, not a fantasy. That's the third rule. Everything here is performance, even the intimacy. She asks you a question, not with her voice, but with her fan. A flick open, held high. Are you a patron or just a passerby? And a glance down, a half smile. Maybe she already knows the answer. You laugh, a little unsure, and she responds with the faintest nod. You're beginning to understand how much can be said without saying anything at all. But you're not here just for the drinks or the small talk. You've come to understand what this life is, because for every graceful turn of the wrist and haunting melody on the shamisen, there's a story like a coiled snake beneath the floorboards. These women, girls often when they begin, don't just wake up one day in red lips and obi belts. Their journey starts far from this flickering candlelight, usually in a home emptied by debt, misfortune or desperation. That geisha across from you? Maybe she was sold at 8, her parents too poor to feed her. Maybe she was the daughter of a seamstress and watched the world pass her by until a stranger offered her family a better future. That's the prettier version. The truth is, many didn't have a choice. You didn't train to be a geisha because it sounded fun. You did it because someone else decided for you. Now here you are, drinking expensive sake with someone who hasn't had a day off in months, whose every word is filtered through layers of etiquette and coded meaning. Her kimono is exquisite, but weighs nearly as much as a toddler. Her hair, styled with wax and pins so heavy it causes headaches. That perfect white makeup mixed with rice powder and sometimes lead slowly poisoning her skin. But she won't show discomfort. That's the point. Outside the tea house, the world stumbles along thinking geisha are simply high-class courtesans. You've heard the rumours. The wrong names tossed around, geisha girl whispered, like a secret. The West came in swinging during the occupation years and never quite understood what they were seeing. Tourists still confuse the line between art and sex, but you're here now and you're starting to get it. There is no line. There's only the performance and the cost of keeping it perfect. The geisha leans in to pour you more sake. You notice the way her fingers never touch the bottle's mouth, how her sleeves flutter just so. It's mesmerizing. But behind her calm gaze, there's a ledger ticking in her head. The cost of her kimono, the debts owed to her okiya, the monthly payments from her patron, if she's lucky enough to have one. It's all business, even the way she laughs at your jokes. Here's a strange little detail. In the 1700s, geisha were actually men. Yeah. The earliest performers in this role were male entertainers, kind of like jesters or musicians. It wasn't until later that women took over the image entirely. And when they did, oh boy, the transformation was complete. They weren't just performers anymore. They became cultural icons, mystics of femininity, masters of subtle power. And prisoners too, in a way. You're probably wondering if they ever fell in love. Real love. Not the scripted affection they show clients. Not the arranged companionship of a Dana. But the messy, headlong kind. The answer? Sometimes. But it was always risky, forbidden. Love meant breaking the illusion. And in a world where your livelihood depended on the illusion, falling for someone could cost you everything. There's a debate still burning in academic circles about what role geisha really played. Were they empowered artists navigating a male-dominated world with genius-level emotional intelligence? Or were they victims of a rigid system that commodified their grace and bound them with invisible strings? The truth, like most truths, probably lives somewhere in the middle, stitched between the hem of a kimono and the silence of a half-lowered gaze. The geisha before you bows her head. Your time is up. Outside, the lanterns still glow, and the night is warm with cicadas and the distant hum of traffic. You step out of the tea house changed, maybe a little haunted. You've seen the paint, but also the cracks beneath it. You're 8 years old, and your world ends with a knock on the door. It's early morning, and your mother has just tied your hair back with a red ribbon that smells faintly of her hands. Rice, soap, sweat. She tells you to be good, that's all, not brave, not careful. Just good. You don't understand yet what that means, but the look in her eyes is the first clue that this is not an ordinary day. Outside, a woman waits in the street, her kimono bright but her face unreadable. You don't know it yet, but she's the owner of an okiya, a geisha house, and she's just purchased your future. She bows to your mother, who bows lower, shame stitched into every vertebra. There's no ceremony, no tears, no long goodbye. Just a quiet nod, the exchange of something wrapped in cloth, and then you're walking beside a stranger, your little feet trying to keep up as the city wakes around you. Your mother watches until you round the corner. Then she closes the door and disappears from your story. Inside the okiya, the air smells different, older, like lacquered wood and pressed fabric and something faintly metallic you can't name. You're shown to a room that isn't yours. Nothing here is yours, not the futon you'll sleep on, not the bowl you'll eat from, not even the name you'll one day perform under. You belong now to the house, to the art, to the contract signed on your behalf. At first, everything hurts. Your knees from kneeling too long, your throat from chanting phrases over and over, your hands from clapping the wrong way, from holding the fan wrong, from failing to make your body into something elegant and light. The older girls laugh at your clumsy steps. The house mother slaps your wrist when you forget to bow deep enough. You cry only at night, into a pillow that smells faintly of camellia oil and someone else's dreams. You quickly learn the hierarchy. At the bottom are the little girls like you, shikomi, servants in training. You sweep the wooden floors, help prepare meals, wash the older girls' garments. Above you are the maiko, the apprentices, all bright colours and clinking hair ornaments. They float through the house like birds, and you watch them the way other children watch princesses. And then there are the geisha, the finished women. They move like ghosts, like silk sliding through shadows, and their voices sound like secrets. Each day begins before sunrise. You scrub the engawa, the wooden corridor along the garden, while the world outside still sleeps. Then it's lessons, shamisen, tea ceremony, dance, calligraphy. You're terrible at all of it. But that doesn't matter. You're not here to be talented. You're here to be shaped, bent into the mould of tradition until there's nothing left of the girl you were. There's a moment a few months in when you decide to run away. You wait until the house is quiet and the sliding door is unlocked. But just as your foot hits the porch, you remember. You owe the house everything. They feed you, clothe you, shelter you. The kimono you might someday wear, paid for by the okiya, the music lessons, debt, the makeup, debt. Even your training is something you'll have to repay with years of service. You don't belong to yourself anymore. You never did. And so you stay. Not because you're brave, but because there's nowhere to go. You're not alone in this. Across Kyoto, Tokyo, Osaka, and a handful of smaller cities, okiya like this one house hundreds of girls just like you. The system has been in place for centuries, since at least the Edo period. And though it shifts with time, the bones of it stay the same. Girls from poor families traded for promise and potential. Some rise, a few escape, many simply fade. One strange thing no one ever tells you. It's not always money that sells a girl. Sometimes it's ambition. There are mothers who dream of having a geisha daughter. A daughter whose beauty might bring prestige, or respect, or just enough cash to lift the rest of the family out of poverty. These mothers visit the tea houses, ask questions, leave photos. They aren't cruel, they're just practical. That's the trickiest part about all of this. It's not overtly evil. There are no chains, no beatings, no cages. Just tradition, and expectation, and the soft trap of elegance. Even scholars can't agree whether girls like you were exploited or elevated. Some say it gave them options, skills, income, even power in certain cases. Others argue it was just a refined version of indentured servitude. The line is thin, almost invisible, like the edge of a fan fluttering between politeness and pressure. But you're not thinking about philosophy. You're thinking about how heavy the water buckets are. About how sore your fingers are from practicing the shamisen's same 3 notes. About how the other girls won't talk to you until you earn your place. And about that strange flicker of pride you feel the first time you balance the tea tray without spilling a drop. There's one older girl, Kana, who notices you. She's already a maiko, maybe 16, and she tells you things when the house mother isn't around. Like how to grip your obi sash so it doesn't unravel, or how to sleep with your head perfectly still so your hair doesn't flatten. She says you remind her of herself. That's the highest compliment you've ever received. Kana doesn't talk about her past, but one night she whispers that she used to sneak food to another shikomi who cried all the time. That girl ran away in winter, she says. No shoes, never fond. Then she turns over and says nothing else. You lie awake thinking about that girl. You wonder if she got far, if she made it to the train station, or just the river. The truth is, it doesn't matter. Her story is a ghost story now, a cautionary tale told by candlelight. You know better. Because one day you'll become a maiko too. You'll wear the bright kimono and the heavy wig and the red and white makeup that makes you look both younger and older than you are. One day you'll dance. One day you'll pour sake and speak in riddles, and carry conversations like porcelain bowls, elegant, delicate, and full of meaning. One day you'll forget what it felt like to belong to yourself. But for now, you sweep the engawa and practice smiling. The house is quiet, and the world outside is waking up. You're 13 when the hair ornaments change. They clink louder now, more elaborate, drawing attention to the curve of your neck and the smoothness of your forehead. Your kimono grows heavier, the sleeves brushing your calves like silk wings every time you bow. You have crossed the invisible line, from shikomi to maiko, apprentice geisha. The transformation doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like pressure tightening across your ribs. Everyone watches you now. Every step, every word, every gesture is noticed, judged, memorized. You don't walk anymore, you glide. You don't speak, you compose. Even your smile is no longer your own. It belongs to the house, to the training, to the image you're learning to perfect. Your day starts before sunrise and ends long after midnight. Lessons still take up most of your morning, shamisen, dance, tea ceremony, etiquette, Kyoto dialect. You're corrected constantly. It doesn't matter that you've practiced for years. Now that you're visible, every mistake is public. One missed bow, one stuttering conversation, and you're reminded you represent your Oni-san, your house, and the whole tradition. There's always someone better, more graceful, more composed. You compete with ghosts, former maiko whose footsteps are impossible to follow, but whose legends are repeated like mantras. And then, of course, there's the dance. You learn the difference between dancing and performing. Anyone can move to music. But to be a maiko is to become the music. Your hands must flutter like cherry blossoms in wind. Your feet must kiss the floor in perfect silence. You watch your One-san perform for a room full of clients and feel your breath catch. She isn't real in that moment. She's something more, a living painting. You study every angle of her movements, trying to burn them into your body. Later, in your room, you mimic them in the dark again and again until your calves cramp and your spine aches. You cry from frustration. Then you do it again the next night. The shamisen remains your personal demon. 3 strings, no frets, and yet somehow it requires the precision of surgery. Your teacher is a man with impeccable posture and absolutely no patience. When you misplace your fingers, he taps your knuckles with a folded fan, never hard, but enough to make your skin sting. He doesn't need to say anything, the disappointment is thick enough to chew. Still, there are moments. A note, a rhythm, a chord change, where the sound resonates in your chest like a heartbeat. You cling to those small victories in an endless battle with tradition. You learn to serve tea as if it's a spiritual offering. The cup must turn twice in your hand before it's placed on the mat. Your sleeves must not dip into the bowl. Your kneeling posture must never collapse, no matter how numb your legs become. And when you speak, your pitch must rise slightly, your sentences ending in that delicate lilting Kyoto accent, soft like wind through bamboo. You are being taught to exist not as a person, but as an atmosphere. The first time you entertain a client, your palms sweat so much they leave damp marks on your kimono lining. You try to hide them. Your Oni-san is with you, of course, guiding the evening like a conductor with invisible strings. You serve sake, laugh at jokes you don't fully understand, and play a simple drinking game involving folded fans and call and response. You watch your Oni-san closely, copying her pace. Her laughter is never too loud, her gaze never lingers too long. You wonder if she was ever scared like this. The man across the table is older, but not ancient. He smells of pine cologne and the faint saltiness of dried fish. He asks your name, your gaime, not your real one, and tells you look like a plum blossom in spring. You bow. He offers you a coin to buy candy. It's not candy money, of course. It's his way of saying, I notice you. Maybe I'll come back. Your heart flutters, not with affection, but with possibility. A good client means more invitations. More invitations mean more money. More money means your debt shortens. One day, if you're lucky, you might even attract a Dana. Kana, now fully geisha, finds you later that night in the corridor. She adjusts your obi with deft fingers and whispers, don't trust compliments. They're just another kind of currency. Then she disappears into her room. You remember what she said for years. You learn about the weight of the smile, how one can disarm a politician, charm a businessman, or convince a drunk actor that you find him fascinating. It's exhausting, this constant performance. You go to bed with your cheeks aching, your jaw tight from hours of curated expressions. There are nights when you forget what your face looks like without makeup, when your reflection, bare and blinking, looks like someone you haven't met yet. Here's a strange fact. Maiko are forbidden from dating. Not officially, not always, but in practice, absolutely. To be seen with a man outside a professional context is to risk scandal, shame, even expulsion. You're expected to be desirable, but never possessed. Beautiful, but distant. Like a flower viewed through glass. Some girls sneak around, of course. Letters passed in secret. Glances exchanged through paper doors, but always with risk. A discovered romance could end your career before it begins, and still, some manage it. There's always the story of so-and-so who married a client and left the world of geisha for good. Some Akia allow it, with the right offer. A wealthy man can buy out your contract, take you away, give you a new life, but it's rare. And it doesn't always end well. More than one girl has returned, eyes lowered, dreams crushed under the weight of a different kind of silence. There's a debate among modern historians about whether maiko and geisha are empowered performers or gilded prisoners. Some say the discipline and artistry give women control in a society that rarely offers it. Others argue that it's simply another cage, one made of brocade and lacquer instead of bars. You don't have the luxury of asking those questions. Not yet. You're too busy getting your eyeliner straight, too busy learning the lyrics to a 200-year-old song, too busy being good. There's one evening that sticks with you. A foreign client asks if he can take a photo. You nod. He leans in and says, "So, you're like a Japanese geisha girl, right? Like in that movie?" You smile politely. That's what you're trained to do, but inside something cold tightens around your ribs. You're not a geisha girl. You're not a scene from a film. You're 14 years old and trying not to drown in expectation. That night, you remove your makeup slowly, carefully. You stare at your face in the mirror, raw, red around the eyes, your lips pale. You try to imagine a future, what it might feel like to be your own person, but the thought slips away like smoke. For now, the long road continues. You still bow too shallow sometimes. Your shamisen playing is improving. Your dance teacher no longer winces. You wear your ornaments with pride, and when you enter a room, people pause. You're becoming someone, but it costs you something every day. The first time you shadow your Oni-san to an ozashiki, an elite private party, it feels like sneaking into a dream. Not your dream exactly, but one curated by someone with expensive taste and questionable morals. The tea house is tucked deep into the heart of Gion, behind a gate carved with the faded chrysanthemums. Inside, paper lanterns glow like soft moons, and low laughter hums from behind closed doors. You keep your steps small, precise. You're not here to speak unless spoken to, you're here to observe and learn. Your Oni-san walks ahead of you, and you swear her feet don't touch the floor. Her kimono tonight is pale lavender embroidered with silver cranes, and her obi is tied in a shape you've never seen before. Wide, architectural, like a sculpture of folded wings. She carries herself like royalty. Clients nod to her with deference, a quiet kind of awe. You trail behind in a simpler ensemble, your makeup lighter, your presence muted by design. You're the echo to her melody, the shadow cast by her grace. In the Ozushiki room, the clients sit cross-legged on cushions, already half a bottle into the evening. Their suits are expensive but ill-fitting, shoulders sagging from too many long days and late nights. They joke loudly, slapping each other's backs, calling for sake like they're commanding troops. Then your Oni-san enters, and suddenly everyone straightens. Even the drunkest of them quiets down. That's the effect of a seasoned geisha. Instant atmosphere. They don't demand attention. They shift the energy of the room without ever raising their voice. She begins with a greeting in that sing-song Kyoto dialect, followed by a brief game that involves balancing a small fan on your nose while reciting tongue twisters. One client fails spectacularly and falls backward, laughing. She laughs too, hand covering her mouth delicately. It's all part of the ritual. A geisha's job isn't to seduce, it's to disarm, entertain, soothe egos without bruising them. She plays the shamisen next, and you see the way the room changes. They're no longer just men in suits, they're boys in awe of a magician. You serve the sake, bowing deeply each time, holding the bottle with two hands as tradition demands. No one talks to you much. A few nod, one winks, another forgets your name. It doesn't matter. You're not here to be memorable. You're here to watch your Oni-san balance art and charm like a dancer on a tightrope. You catch every gesture, every blink. She never once appears tired, annoyed, or bored, even when the jokes turn crude or the compliments start to rot around the edges. Afterward, when you're walking home together through the back alleys of Gion, your feet throbbing from hours of kneeling and serving, you finally speak. How do you do it, you ask? Pretend like that? She doesn't look at you when she answers. It's not pretending. It's transforming. You nod, though you don't fully understand. Not yet, but you will. Over the next year, you shadow her constantly. You're her little tail, always one step behind, always watching. You carry her bags, help her into her Gita sandals, fetch the items she forgets. She lets you see the cracks, the way her back aches after performances, the calluses on her fingers from shamisen strings. The moment before a party when she exhales deeply once, like it's the only breath she's allowed to release all day. Sometimes she talks about her past in small pieces, a fisherman's daughter, chosen by a recruiter who visited her village. Promises made, then rewritten. Her first performance at 15, her first heartbreak at 17. You store her words like beads in a box, each one a glimpse into the real cost of grace. You also see the way other women treat her. Geisha from rival Akia, maiko from different districts. Some are kind, others cold. The hierarchy is rigid, and the competition is real. Every party she gets is one another geisha didn't. Every compliment, every patron, every whispered offer behind a folding screen. It's a battlefield in silks and smiles. You don't play the game yet, but you know the rules are brutal. One night she takes you to a dance rehearsal at a small theatre. You sit in the corner, legs tucked beneath you, watching her move across the stage like liquid shadow. The choreography is slow, meticulous, every movement an echo of something centuries old. The music is soft and dissonant, and her arms carve through it like brushstrokes on rice paper. You forget to blink. It's not about entertainment, it's about reverence. Dance isn't a skill here, it's a sacred language, and she speaks it fluently. You begin to perform too, small appearances at low-tier parties, just you and another junior maiko. Your hands tremble, your voice wavers. Once you forget the second verse of a seasonal song and the room goes awkwardly quiet for a beat too long. You bow until your forehead brushes the tatami mat. The embarrassment burns like a fever, but no one scolds you afterward. Instead, you're met with a kind of resigned silence from your Oni-san that cuts deeper. Disappointment is worse than anger, but you improve. Each mistake refines you. You stop fumbling your sleeves, your shamisen fingers stop shaking, clients begin to request your name, and one evening, after a long performance where you manage to hold a room's attention for a full 20 minutes, your Oni-san hands you a fresh comb made of ivory and mother of pearl. It's a small gift, but it means she sees you, that you're becoming someone worthy of the stage. You learn that the most important trait a geisha must master isn't beauty or talent, it's emotional precision. You must read a room instantly, sense which man is nursing a heartbreak and which one wants to be flattered. You need to absorb moods like ink into rice paper. Smile at the right moment. Pause your story just long enough for someone to lean in. You become a mirror, reflecting everyone else's desire while hiding your own. There's one odd story you hear around this time. A geisha in the 30s who became so famous for her dance that she was rumoured to have been offered a government position. Pure myth, probably. But still, the idea lingers. That a woman from this world could wield enough power to make the nation pause. It's comforting in a way, even if it's probably not true. And even as your world narrows into a loop of performances, practice and preparation, you find moments of strange peace, walking home in the snow with your Gita soles squeaking softly, brushing your hair beside a paper lantern, watching your reflection glow and fade, sharing late-night rice crackers with the other maiko, giggling under the covers like schoolgirls. But always, always, your Oni-san is there, your compass, your cautionary tale. And one day you'll take her place. Someone else will trail behind you, watching, learning, waiting. You wonder what kind of mentor you'll be. You learn to float through rooms without leaving a trace. That's what being a maiko demands. Visibility without intrusion, presence without weight. You're adored, yes. Men compliment your voice, your laugh, the way your hair ornaments shimmer when you bow. They marvel at your poise and posture, whisper that you're more elegant than a princess, but none of them really know you. And that's by design. You're becoming what every geisha must become. Adored, admired, and absolutely untouchable. There's a cruel kind of irony to it. You spend your life mastering the art of charm, only to be kept at a distance. You're too perfect to touch, too refined to know. The men at the tea house want to sit close, yes, but they don't want to hear your real voice. Not your tired voice, not the one that yawns and curses and longs for a day off. They want the practiced laugh, the elegant pause, the delicate tilt of your head that suggests mystery without ever offering truth. They want the idea of you. So you become the idea. You stop correcting people when they call you graceful instead of exhausted. You lean into it. You smile when someone says, "You're like a living doll." You nod politely when someone refers to you as a flower that never wilts, never ages. You thank them even though the tight shoes have already bent your toes, and the white makeup has begun to irritate the skin around your nose. You play the role so well that some nights even you forget where the performance ends. You realise it the night a guest asks what your favourite song is, and you answer automatically with a traditional minyo tune that you've been taught to recite during ozushiki. Later, in bed, you try to remember what music you actually enjoy, but nothing comes. You try to picture your favourite food, but all you can think of are the seasonal dishes you're trained to list depending on the month. Somewhere along the line, the real you slipped behind the curtain, and no one noticed. Not even you. And yet this outsider status isn't unique to you. It's the job. It's the entire system. Geisha are revered. Symbols of grace, refinement, beauty, but always from a distance. You aren't a wife, a daughter, a mother. You don't belong in the world of women, but you're not exactly part of the world of men either. You exist in the narrow candlelit space between them, a permanent guest in every room, even your own. You attend a banquet one night with a group of powerful politicians. The room is full of smoke and low voices, and someone makes a joke about the emperor that earns a nervous round of laughter. You pour drinks, smile, tell a witty story about the changing of the seasons. They eat it up. Afterward, one of the men pulls you aside and says, "You're not like other girls." He means it as a compliment. You nod, bow, say thank you, but inside you flinch, because he's right. You're not like other girls. You've been trained out of it. That's the unspoken truth behind every polished gesture. You've sacrificed your humanity to become an icon. You've learned to swallow boredom, pain, even your own opinions. You've become a master of the unspoken, of smiling when you want to scream, of laughing when you'd rather run. And you're not alone. You talk with other maiko between performances, during stolen moments in narrower corridors or shared meals. One confesses she hasn't seen her family in over a year. Another says she sometimes dreams of cutting her hair and disappearing into the countryside. None of you speak these thoughts aloud too often. The house has ears, and besides it feels disloyal somehow, to complain about a life that's supposed to be so beautiful. There's a fringe belief among some of the older women that geisha aren't just entertainers, they're priestesses of a kind. Keepers of old traditions, protectors of feminine mystery. You hear them speak in hushed tones about how the world outside moves too fast, too loud, and how the geisha world is one of the last places where beauty is slow and deliberate. They say you don't just preserve art, you are art. And maybe that's true, but art can't eat when it's hungry or sleep when it's tired. Still, there's a strange power in being separate. Outsiders see you as unreachable, which makes them lean in closer. You can influence from the margins. You can hear secrets whispered in confidence. Watch deals being made over sake and folded napkins. You've seen men fall in love with your shadow, spend thousands just to sit in your presence. You learn to wield that desire like a blade, not cruelly, just precisely. You smile more at the one who might sponsor your next kimono. You linger near the one with political connections. You're not manipulative, you're strategic, because in this world, strategy is survival. You recall one evening when a rival maiko, Aika, spills sake on a client's lap. An accident, truly, but the client, drunk and puffed up with self-importance, takes offence. He refuses to speak to her again, tells the tea house owner she lacks elegance. The next week she stops being invited to events, just like that. One clumsy gesture, and her rising star dims. You learn the lesson without having to make the mistake yourself. One wrong move can cost you everything. You also learn there's an art to apologies. You bow, of course, but not just any bow. The right bow, the angle matters, the length, the tone of your voice. There's an apology that says, "I'm sorry," and another that says, "I still have value." You learn both. One night you overhear a group of clients talking through the paper wall. They're discussing you. Not cruelly, just candidly. She's almost ready. Too soft-spoken, but she listens well. Give her 2 more years and she'll be a star. They're not speaking to you, but it feels like they're assigning your worth piece by piece, as if you're a product to be reviewed. And maybe you are. You've been shaped for the market since you were 8. But here's the strange twist. Sometimes you like it. Not being reduced, but being admired. There's a thrill in knowing your presence can light up a room, that your performance, your voice, your story, your dance can leave someone speechless. You have skills that most people will never master. You move with confidence, dress like royalty, speak in a dialect most modern girls can't even fake, and you've earned it. Every bruise, every blister, every humiliating misstep, it's all brought you here. To this place where you are a living paradox, both revered and invisible, powerful and powerless, seen and unseen. One of the house mothers once told you, to be a perfect geisha, you must disappear entirely behind your art. You didn't understand then, but now you do. You look in the mirror before a performance and see the transformation. The painted face, the lined eyes, the lips like a tiny red bow. You're no longer a girl, you're a symbol, a question with no clear answer. And you carry that silence with pride. There's a fan in your hand, lightweight, gold-ribbed, soft as breath when you open it. You hold it precisely between your index finger and thumb, wrist slightly bent. The room watches you, but they don't know what you're saying. That's because this fan, this unassuming little tool, is how you speak without words. You flick it once and set it low on your lap. That's a modest greeting. You raise it to shoulder height and hide your mouth behind it. That's flirtation. You snap it closed without looking at anyone, and that's a dismissal. Every gesture is deliberate. Every movement coded. Tonight, the fan says everything your lips aren't allowed to. You're performing a seasonal dance, Gion Kosho no Yoru, a subtle story of a willow tree and a courtesan waiting for spring. The music winds around you, slow and breathy, and your body moves in time, like calligraphy unfolding in space. When you lift the fan above your head and turn your wrist, the audience doesn't just see a girl waving a prop. They see snow melting on the temple tiles, cherry blossoms drifting into the Kamo River. They see longing, they see restraint, they see a story so old it hums under their skin. This is what you've trained for. To use a flick of your wrist, a tilt of your head, a measured pause between movements to transmit meaning that transcends language. You are no longer you. You are emotion embodied. Melancholy in motion. The fan dips, the music stops, the room exhales as one. But the truth? That whole time you're thinking about the blister forming under your left big toe. Backstage, you collapse onto the tatami and pull off your zori, hissing as the raw skin peeks through. Your dance instructor raises an eyebrow and drops a folded cloth at your feet. "Bleed in silence," she mutters, not unkindly. The art doesn't care how you feel. And that's the hard truth of the geisha world. Beauty doesn't have room for pain. If you do it right, no one sees your effort. If they see your struggle, the illusion shatters. And if the illusion shatters, so does your worth. Still, you're fascinated by the language of movement. The non-verbal traditions pass down like ancient spells. You learn that a woman adjusting her kimono collar can signal vulnerability or invitation, depending on how slowly she moves. That the angle of a kneel can indicate subservience, shame, or silent confidence. That even pouring sake has its rules. Never pour for yourself and never turn the bottle more than 90 degrees. Each act is a code within a code. Each rule designed to maintain not just politeness, but precision. There's a phrase your teacher repeats often, katachi ni kokoro ari, form contains heart. The idea is that emotion isn't shown through expression or loud gestures, but through perfect form. You don't need to smile wide to show joy. Your posture should glow with it. You don't need to cry to show sorrow. Your fan will do that for you. The body is the brush, the tradition, the ink. You start dreaming in gestures. Waking up in the middle of the night with your fingers flexed mid-dance. You find yourself nodding silently to people even outside the tea houses, out of habit. One time a child asks if you're a statue come to life. You smile politely and say nothing. You've forgotten how to be casual. Here's an odd little detail you come across in your studies. Some geisha, especially in the pre-war era, developed their own private sign languages, a blend of hand signs, eye cues, and sleeve adjustments so they could speak silently during performances or send messages to their apprentices mid-banquet. Not Japanese sign language, not official, just theirs. Secret, fleeting, like everything else about your world. There's one night when a client, an older man with eyes that crinkle too much when he smiles, starts watching your every move with almost comical intensity. You're nervous, you don't know what he wants. Then he leans over to your Onisan and whispers, "She speaks with her hands better than most people speak with their mouths." You pretend not to hear it, but that compliment stays with you longer than most. You don't even remember his name, but you remember the way it felt to be seen for your precision, not just your appearance. Of course, the other side of that coin is that every movement becomes a performance. There is no off. Even when you're alone, brushing your hair or sipping tea in the garden, someone might be watching through a paper screen, a slightly ajar door, a curious client arriving early. You live in a house of observation, of thin walls and thinner privacy, so your gestures remain graceful, even when no one's there to applaud them. And eventually it starts to change you. You notice when someone sits too quickly, when someone gestures too widely, when someone pours a drink sloppily. You feel it like a shiver down your spine, not because it's rude, but because it's wrong, out of sync with the rhythm of your world, a broken beat in an otherwise perfect performance. There's a scholarly argument still ongoing about whether these nonverbal codes were a form of social power or social control. Some argue that the language of fans and gestures allowed geisha to communicate secretly, maintain agency in male-dominated spaces. Others suggest it was just another system of rules designed to constrain, to mould women into palatable, predictable forms. You see both sides. You feel both sides. Because yes, the fan lets you reject a client without uttering a word, but also yes, it reminds you you're not allowed to just say no. One evening, you're invited to a particularly important ozashiki, a visiting diplomat. The stakes are high. Your house mother gives you a last look before you go and says, "Use your fan wisely tonight." You think she means it literally, but as the evening unfolds, you realise she was speaking in riddles again. The man is charming but probing. He pushes boundaries with compliments that feel like questions. You respond with gestures, a fan placed between you, a small shift of your body, a lowered gaze. You perform that entire evening in silence, and somehow you say everything you need to. Later, your Onisan pats your shoulder and says, "He was trying to test you. You passed." She says it like a small ceremony, like you've added a new layer to your mask. And maybe you have. You begin to understand that in this life, Saying nothing is not weakness, it's strategy. Saying nothing means controlling the narrative. Saying nothing means power. The fan rests on your lap now, half open, catching the candlelight. A tiny gold bird is painted on the paper folds. You close it slowly, precisely, and set it beside your teacup. You've said enough for tonight. You meet your first Dana on a rainy evening in early spring. The kind of night when the cherry blossoms are still shy and the sidewalks shimmer like mirrors. He's not what you expect, no leering smile or greedy eyes. Just a quiet man in his early 50s with soft hands and a voice that sounds like someone clearing fog from glass. He wears a dark suit and an expensive watch, but he keeps fiddling with his cufflinks like he doesn't quite know where to put his hands. When he enters the tea house, everyone straightens, not because he demands it, but because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Your housemother introduces him to your Onisan first, then to you. You bow low, careful to pause just a fraction longer than necessary. You've been trained for this moment. He offers polite compliments and asks about your training. You recite a few practiced lines. He nods with interest, not lecherous, just observant. He's here to watch, to evaluate, not your beauty. You're already beautiful by default in the dual world, but your potential, whether you're a good investment. Because that's what a Dana is. An investor, a benefactor, a kind of private sponsor who agrees to fund part or all of your geisha career. He may pay for your kimono, your hairdresser, your lessons, sometimes even your living expenses. In return, he gets time with you, affection, company, and occasionally more than that. But that's always left unsaid, like everything else here. You don't choose your Dana outright. The Okiya has to approve. It's a negotiation, really, like a subtle business deal folded inside layers of tea and charm. Some girls dream of landing a Dana early, hoping for financial security and fewer debts. Others dread the arrangement, wary of what's expected behind closed screens. You're not sure yet. The man returns a few more times. Sometimes he requests you specifically, sometimes he comes under the pretense of seeing your Oni-san. You serve his sake. You perform a short dance. He laughs at your jokes in that quiet, sincere way. You don't know what he wants, but you know he's circling. One night, your housemother pulls you aside. She speaks softly but directly. He's interested, she says. You'll need to decide. You feel like someone just handed you a porcelain mask and asked you to wear it for the rest of your life. You sit with your Oni-san that evening and ask her what it's really like to have a Dana. She hesitates, swirling her tea. Depends on the man, she says finally. Some want a geisha, others want a wife. The best ones want a muse. You ask what hers was. She smiles with a kind of bittersweet softness. Mine wanted silence, so I gave it to him. The next week the arrangement is formalised. You bow as your name is spoken and no one looks at you directly. That's the fourth rule of this world. Everything important happens in whispers. Your Dana begins to send small gifts, silk accessories, imported chocolates, a book of haiku with a pressed flower inside. You thank him politely each time. The gesture matters more than the object. He visits often, but never alone, always with others. He watches your performances with the expression of someone who's invested in a garden that hasn't bloomed yet, encouraging, evaluating, waiting. You wonder constantly what he expects. He's never touched you, never asked for a private meeting, but there's a weight that settles over you when he's near. Not fear exactly, just awareness. You are now someone's curated masterpiece. There's a myth that every geisha must sleep with her Dana, that the relationship is inherently sexual. It's not that simple. Some do, some don't. Some start out as companions and drift into romance. Some never cross the line. Others cross it early and then spend years trying to find the boundary again. It's an unspoken understanding negotiated in sideways glances and long pauses. Your Dana tells you once, I admire your discipline. It's meant as praise, but you feel like a puppet being complimented on her strings. Still, there are benefits. Your Okiya debt shrinks dramatically. You get priority in choosing fabric for your next kimono. Your hairdresser starts visiting twice a week instead of once. People begin to whisper your name with a new kind of tone, not scandalous, just significant. But it also changes how you're treated. Some of the other maiko keep their distance now, like your status makes you a little too sharp, a little too polished. One of them even mutters under her breath, "Must be nice to have a wallet instead of a spine." You don't respond, you just smile. You've learned not to react. Still, the loneliness sets in quietly. You begin to feel like you're living in a bubble within a bubble, a performance within a performance. The life of a maiko was already distant from normal life, but now with a dana you're removed even from your peers. It's not isolation, it's elevation, but that doesn't make it feel any less cold. You ask yourself sometimes if this is what you wanted. Not just the makeup and dances, but this, the patronage, the subtle obligations, the knowledge that your life is being quietly funded by someone who might expect more. You're never sure how to answer. Here's a strange bit of history you stumble across during one of your language lessons. In the early Edo period, some geisha refused to take a dana. As a matter of personal or artistic principle, they believed it compromised their independence. Some even went bankrupt rather than accept one. They're rare, those stories. Rare, and always told with a hint of tragedy. Because while the system allows for freedom, it rarely rewards it. There's an ongoing academic debate about this too, whether the dana system was a form of empowerment, allowing women access to wealth and influence otherwise unavailable, or whether it was just another leash, gilded and perfumed but still a leash. You feel both sides pressing against your ribs. The worst part is the ambiguity. You never know what's expected until you cross a line, and by then it's too late to retreat. So you toe the edge every day, a smile that's warm but not inviting, a laugh that encourages but doesn't open doors, a presence that flatters but never suggests ownership. And yet, part of you does feel grateful, not for the man but for the space he's created, the freedom to worry less about debt, to train harder, to perform more. Your dana doesn't own you, but he funds the version of you that others admire. You don't love him, but you're starting to see the cracks in your judgment about what love even means here. You catch yourself thinking, maybe this is as close as I get to affection, maybe this is affection. And then you fold that thought into a fan and wave it away. The first time your skin reacts to the white makeup, it's just a little itch at the corner of your jaw. You ignore it, assuming it's a stray hair or the edge of your collar pressing too tight. But by the end of the week, there's a rash, red, raised, and itching, like fire ants in a kimono. You sit quietly as the house mother examines your face under the light of a paper lantern, clicking her tongue, then ordering one of the junior maiko to fetch a different brand of oshiroi, the white foundation you apply every day to become, well, you. The new powder is softer, less grainy, but it still burns. So do the layers of wax you apply before painting your skin, meant to smooth your features and keep the makeup from sliding. It smells faintly like crayons and regret. After several weeks, the rash begins to darken, your skin flaking under your chin like old wallpaper. You keep applying it anyway, because without it you're not a maiko. Without it, you're just a girl in a robe. No one tells you this part. Not in the books, not in the movies. The iconic white face what tourists photograph and Westerners fetishize isn't just symbolic. It's toxic, literally. In the old days, it was made with lead. Women in the 1800s died slow, internal deaths, their bones weakening, their minds clouding. You're lucky. Yours is modern, safe-ish. Still, it dries your skin, clogs your pores, and leaves you with a permanent dull ache behind the ears, where the paint stretches tight. The makeup must be perfect. It's not just about looking good, it's a ritual. Your base layer is oshiroi, spread evenly with a spatula, then blended with water until your face becomes a blank canvas. Over that comes the red, eyes, lips, corners of the eyes tinged with tiny flicks of crimson, like tears of camellia. Your eyebrows are softened, your nose shaded. You apply 2 strokes of rouge in a shape that makes your lips smaller, not fuller. It's not about allure, it's about tradition. And then there's the nape of the neck, the most central part of the body in geisha aesthetics. You leave it partially unpainted, forming 2 teardrop shapes that dip into the collar of your kimono. It's subtle, but powerful, suggestive but never vulgar. That's the art. Say more with less. Suggest a storm with a single ripple. You get so used to seeing yourself in whiteface that your real skin begins to look strange in the mirror. You catch glimpses of your bare self after washing up at night and think, who is that? The girl in the reflection has uneven skin and tired eyes. You scrub her away with hot towels, scalding your cheeks to make sure no white pigment lingers in the pores. Still, the next morning when you reach for the brush again, the itch returns, like a ghost that never quite left. The physical toll doesn't stop there. The traditional wigs, known as katsura, are heavy, anchored with wax and pins that pull your scalp until your temples throb. You sleep on a wooden pillow to preserve the style, neck resting awkwardly on a curved block no wider than a chopstick. If you shift too much in your sleep, the hair flattens, and you're punished with early morning touch-ups, or worse, a disappointed sigh from your dresser. The weight of the kimono is no less brutal. In winter, it's bearable, almost comforting. Layers upon layers wrap around you like a soft fortress. But in summer, it's a furnace. You sweat under the silk, the obi crushing your ribs, the collar sticking to your neck. Still, your expression remains placid. You're expected to float, not wilt. Sweat is impolite. Discomfort is irrelevant. Your feet, confined in narrow zori or sky-high okubo sandals, begin to warp. You develop bunions, one of your toenails turns black and falls off. You wince during long walks but never complain. Pain is part of the uniform. Kana once tells you, while soaking her feet in cold tea to reduce swelling, if you want comfort, become a nurse. If you want respect, you bleed in zori. She's only half joking, and yet no one talks about this openly. The myth of the geisha is too powerful. Tourists wander the streets of Gion hoping for a glimpse of a maiko in full dress, gasping like they've seen a comet. They take photos without asking, call you geisha girl like it's a title from a fantasy novel. You smile, you always smile, but inside you wonder how many of them would last a week in your skin, in your shoes, in your silence. One day, during a rare break, you flip through an old fashion magazine from the 1980s and find a geisha article titled Living Doll of the East. You close the magazine and press your palm against it, like you could smother the phrase into ash. You're not a doll. You're not wind-up Grace. You're a person under this paint, sweating and sore and tired of being everyone's symbol. There's one thing that helps: dance. When you're performing, the aches fall away, the fan glides, the music carries you. Your feet remember the steps without complaint. There's no time to itch, no time to wince. You're motion and story. You're fire in slow motion. Afterward, the pain rushes back in, but for those few minutes you feel light. There's an obscure tale in the community about a maiko who removed her makeup and danced barefaced at a party after drinking too much sake. No formal record exists, but the story circulates like an urban legend. Some say she was expelled, others say she was quietly married off to a businessman and vanished. A few whisper she was applauded for her honest beauty and allowed to continue. But none of you believe that version. No one survives breaking the illusion. There's a debate among cultural historians about how much the aesthetics of geisha life have changed versus how much they've refused to change. Some say modern makeup and wigs are lighter, more skin-friendly. Easier to apply. Others argue that any shift is met with resistance, that the power of the geisha lies in her commitment to the past, even when the past is uncomfortable, painful, outdated. You see truth in both. Your makeup kit has both ancient and modern tools. You wear handmade wigs, but sometimes the pins are made of acrylic, not ivory. Your lips are painted with brush strokes learned from centuries past, but your liner is stored in a plastic case made in Osaka. The contradiction lives on your face, and still you keep painting it, every day, even when your cheeks sting, even when your neck aches, because when the makeup is complete, when you tie the obi, step into the zori, and place the final ornament in your hair, you vanish. And something larger takes your place. Not a lie, not exactly, just the version of you the world is willing to applaud. You learn to read a room before you even step into it. The vibrations reach you first. Low murmurs, a certain stiffness in the air, laughter that feels forced or free. You can tell from the way a slipper scuffs the tatami, or how a host adjusts his sleeve, whether a client is in the mood to be entertained, or would rather be left to his silence. And once the door opens, you transform accordingly. You're not a performer walking onto a stage, you're a diplomat entering a negotiation, except your weapons are wit, laughter, sake, and a fan that never quite leaves your hand. Tonight's party is different. Not one of the usual ozoshiki with aging businessmen and predictable banter, but a political gathering, governors, chiso advisors, and 2 men from Tokyo who keep their coats on longer than anyone else in the room. You and your Oni-san are there early, lighting incense, practicing how to introduce yourselves with the slightly more formal phrasing expected at such an event. There's tension in the air already, not quite hostile, but tight. Someone important is watching. That's always the most dangerous kind of night, the ones where people smile too much and say too little. You take your position near the edge of the room, pouring drinks, offering warm towels, and keeping your movements fluid. You speak only when spoken to, you laugh when appropriate. You pretend not to notice the subtle shuffling of papers under the table, or the sharp glance exchanged between two of the guests. But your Oni-san notices too. Her eyes flick to you once, a barely perceptible signal. Say nothing, stay close. A discussion begins about a new zoning project in Osaka, and just like that, the air changes. Voices lower. Someone closes the paper doors with a little too much care. The youngest politician in the room taps his glass 3 times, a deliberate rhythm that clearly means something. Your heart picks up. You're not supposed to be listening, but you are supposed to remember. That's the unspoken job of every geisha in rooms like this. Be present but invisible, silent but absorbing. Your fan moves, but your ears stay open. Someone mentions a name you recognise, an official from Kyoto rumoured to be stepping down soon. The Tokyo guests exchange a look. A new project will be in. A tea house might need to close, land will change hands. It sounds like casual gossip, but you know better. Power trades in whispers. Later, after the sake flows more freely and the tension softens, the same guests will clap along to your dance. One of them will compliment your control, your grace, another will jokingly ask if you're available for Tokyo events. You'll smile. You'll demur. You'll tilt your head in the practiced way that suggests both flattery and distance. But you'll remember what you heard. And so will your Oni-san. That's how it works. Geisha are not just entertainers. You're part performer, part spy. You exist in the corner of the room near the screens and the shadows, where the men forget you're listening. They speak as if you're decoration. And in doing so, they reveal themselves. The house mothers sometimes refer to it as kuki wo yomu, reading the air. You do it constantly. You know which client had a fight with his wife just by the way he sighs into his drink. You can sense when a new guest feels threatened by his colleagues and needs more attention. You know when to steer the conversation toward flowers and away from politics, and when to lean in and make a client forget for just a moment that he's expected to be dangerous. There's a particular kind of power in being underestimated. You wear a smile like armour and silence like a blade. You don't correct men who misquote poetry, you don't challenge their stories, but you remember every name, every date, every time someone said, "Keep this between us." You never write it down, but it's there, stored in your mind like lacquered secrets. And should your okiya ever need to negotiate something, say an expensive favour or the protection of a beloved tea house, those secrets become currency. Once, a rival geisha was accused of leaking something, a piece of gossip that found its way to a newspaper. No one could prove it, but her clients stopped calling. Her invitations dried up. She wasn't expelled, but she may as well have been. That's the price of betrayal, not punishment. Irrelevance. You ask your Oni-san once if she's ever used a secret as leverage. She doesn't answer. She just pats your hand and says, "We never use, we only remember." That's enough. And she's right. Memory is the most dangerous thing you own. But the politics don't just live in the rooms of men. There are power games in the tea houses too. Between geisha, between okiya, between factions in Gion and Pontocho. Invitations are carefully watched. Appearances are weighed like gold. One missed ozashiki can signal disfavour. One new kimono worn too early can spark rumours of financial backing from a suspicious source. Your life is a stage layered with intrigue. There's an old tradition where 2 rival geisha might perform at the same party, each trying to outshine the other with grace, with wit, with charm, not with confrontation but with subtle sabotage. One might reference a dance the other isn't yet trained to perform, forcing her into embarrassment. Another might praise a mutual client's poetry in a way that implies she's read far more of it than her rival. No one raises their voice, no one throws a drink, but by the end of the night everyone knows who won. You haven't reached that level yet, but you see it happening. You're starting to understand how power really flows, not through loud declarations, but through murmurs, through the soft places in a room where everyone pretends they're being polite, but every smile hides a sharp edge. One night after a particularly tense banquet, your Oni-san pulls you aside as you remove your hair ornaments. "Did you notice what the governor's aide didn't say?" You blink at her, confused. "He mentioned the bridge project, but not the tea garden." You nod slowly. She smiles. That's where the truth hides, in the omissions. There's a theory whispered among a few progressive historians that geisha were the original soft power brokers in Japanese society, that they influenced deals, nudged alliances, shaped reputations with nothing more than well-placed compliments and perfectly timed dances. Of course, it's hard to prove. The whole point is that the evidence never touches paper, that the influence leaves no trace. But you've seen enough now to know it's not a theory. It's a quiet truth. And you're becoming very good at quiet truths. There's a saying in the Okiya, a geisha's greatest rival is the one who shares her mirror. You don't fully understand it at first. When you're still young, still wiping the tatami floors with sore knees and carrying your Oni-san sandals, rivalry seems like a distant concept. Something for the older girls, something elegant, controlled. But as your invasions grow more frequent, as your name begins to circulate in whispers among clients and house mothers, you begin to see the cracks in the silk. Her name is Sumaya, and she is magnificent. She joined the Okiya a year before you, a few years older, already ahead in her training, already a favourite among several wealthy clients. Her skin is porcelain smooth, her posture unnaturally perfect, her laugh soft but razor sharp. When she enters a room, people turn, not out of politeness but fascination. She wears tradition like a crown. Every gesture is precise, every compliment threaded with subtext. She has a way of making you feel like you've been chosen just by being near her. You admire her. Of course you do. How could you not? And she admires you too, or at least, she used to. The tension begins slowly, like hairline fractures in lacquer. A glance held just a second too long, a comment that sounds kind but stings beneath the surface. Oh, your dance was so expressive, I almost forgot it was supposed to be restrained. Things like that. Too subtle to confront, but sharp enough to bleed. You tell yourself it's nothing, just the natural rhythm of shared ambition. But the truth curls around your feet like smoke. You and Sumaya are booked for many of the same events. The clients often compare you, even when they don't realise they're doing it. Ah, Sumaya-san told that story better. Or, I didn't know you could play the shamisen like that. They mean no harm, but every comment adds weight to your shoulders. You don't want to compete, but you also don't want to be second. And Sumaya doesn't like to lose. At one party you performed Gion Kuta, a classic seasonal piece. You've practiced it for weeks, each movement drilled into your muscles. The music starts, you lift your fan, you begin to move, but halfway through you notice the subtle murmur at the edge of the room. Sumaya is whispering to a client, your client. Quietly, sweetly, just enough to draw the attention away. You falter, just a step, but you feel it ripple through the room. Afterward, you bow, smile, and leave the stage with your heart pounding like war drums. You find Sumaya backstage adjusting her hairpin with deliberate calm. You were lovely, she says, not looking at you. So raw. You thank her. You do not throw your fan across the room. You do not cry. You smile, nod and leave. But something shifts in you that night. You begin to study her. Not just her dance, but her strategy. You learn when she prefers to speak and when she lets silence work in her favour. You notice how she subtly claims space in a room, how she ensures she's seated between the most important guests, how she times her laughter to coincide with applause. It's not manipulation, it's mastery, and you hate how much you admire it. You start to sharpen your own edges, not with malice, with intention. You learn to enter a room with stillness instead of flourish. You learn which guests prefer short conversations and which enjoy being gently teased. You develop a laugh just for older patrons, warm, familiar, nostalgic. You begin to fold your stories with layers of meaning, wrapping compliments in poetry, embedding references only the most attentive will catch. You stop trying to be liked. You start being unforgettable. And it works. Your name climbs. Your invitations increase. Clients begin to ask about you first. One even sends you a rare fabric from Kyoto, saying your presence sounds of spring rain and old dreams. You don't know what that means exactly, but it's beautiful. And it means you're winning. Sumaya notices. Of course she does. You don't speak of it directly. You never will, but the air between you becomes brittle. You pass each other in the hallway with polite bows, with smiles that feel stitched on. You used to laugh together, now you only nod. There's an old story told in the Okiya about two geisha in the 1800s who competed so fiercely they tried to outdance each other at the same party and both collapsed from exhaustion. Some say one poisoned the other's tea, others claim they became lifelong friends. No one knows the truth, but every girl knows the moral. Rivalry is tradition in this house. But rivalry doesn't always mean cruelty. Some nights when you're both called to the same ozashiki, you fall into rhythm. You play the shamisen, she sings. The music folds around you like mist. The guests sit spellbound. You glance at her mid-performance and see something like acknowledgement pass across her face. Not affection, not surrender, just recognition. This is the game, and you're both very good at it. There's a fringe belief among some scholars that the world of geisha, for all its elegance and complexity, is a microcosm of survival. Not just cultural preservation, but emotional Darwinism. You evolve or you vanish. Those who can read the air rise. Those who can't fade into the tatami. You see it happen. One of the younger maiko, Fuyu, quiet and soft-spoken, begins to disappear from invitations. She's lovely, but timid. Her performances lack presence. Guests forget her name. Eventually she returns to her family in the countryside. No ceremony, no farewell, just an empty futon and a lesson. That could have been you, it still could be. So you keep refining. You accept the rivalry with Samaya not as threat, but fuel. You wear your kimono with sharper folds. You dance with deeper stillness. You let silence stretch longer between your lines. You master the art of letting a room come to you. And one night, late after a banquet, as you both remove your ornaments in the shared dressing room, she looks at you, not with malice, with something older, tired maybe. You're becoming very skilled, she says. You smile. I learned from the best. She pauses, nods, turns away. And just like that, you realise something strange. You don't hate her. She's not your enemy. She's your near mirror. And if one of you cracks, you both shatter. You hear things you're not supposed to hear. Not just whispers during parties or murmured gossip between clients after the third bottle of Usai, but real secrets, heavy ones, trembling at the edge of scandal. And the thing is, you never ask for them. You never lean in with prying eyes or push for more than what's offered. But something about your silence, your perfectly timed smile, your fan poised just so, makes people want to tell you things. Or maybe they just forget you're there. Either way, the paper walls aren't as soundproof as everyone pretends they are. It starts with small confessions. A politician laughs too hard and mutters that he's misusing funds from a community revitalization project to build his mistress a tea room. A businessman brags that he's selling land to foreigners under his cousin's name to get around zoning restrictions. You pour the sake, smile, and tilt your head slightly, the way you were taught to when a client says something just slightly inappropriate. It's your way of saying, I'm not judging, but I am listening. You never repeat what you hear. That's not how this world works. A geisha with a loose tongue loses her tongue, or at least her career. Discretion is currency. That's what makes you valuable. Not just your beauty, not just your dance, but the way you can cradle someone's secrets like you're tucking them into bed. But the secrets grow heavier. One night, a high-ranking guest, sharp suit, bloodshot eyes, asks you to walk with him after the party. Just a short stroll through the back alley behind the ochaya. He's polite. You're wary, but your Onisan nods that it's okay. So you go. The alley is dark, the air full of incense and fried oil from a nearby restaurant. He walks ahead of you, then stops suddenly and says, I think they're going to make me resign. You freeze. This isn't a confession. It's a warning. He doesn't look at you. Just stares into the night like he's trying to read the future on the walls. I leaked something, he mutters. They'll never prove it, but still, I've been sloppy. You're not sure if he's telling you because he trusts you, or because he thinks you're too unimportant to matter. But either way, you know now. And that knowledge folds itself into you like another layer of your kimono, tight, invisible, and impossible to remove. When you return to the tea house, you say nothing, but your Oni-san glances at your face and frowns slightly, as if she already knows. The next week, he doesn't return. You hear, through the whispered grapevine of Gion, that he's left for Osaka. No farewell, no explanation, just vanished. Later, the house mother calls you in. She speaks softly, like someone addressing a pot too full to stir. You'll hear things, she says, more and more as you rise. You need to know the difference between a secret and a weapon. You nod. She doesn't elaborate. She doesn't need to. There's an academic theory that geisha helped shape the flow of political influence in the post-war period. acting as unofficial intermediaries between businessmen and bureaucrats. That the tea houses became soft negotiation spaces, free from surveillance, where deals were sketched in fan games and finalised over dance performances, it's hard to verify. The only records exist in the folds of memory and the rare journal entry. But from what you've seen, it's not just theory, because you know which banker is laundering money through a construction company, you know which actor is sleeping with a cabinet member's niece, you know that the supposedly widowed foreign diplomat who flirts with everyone actually has a husband in Berlin, and you know that all these things, while fascinating, must remain unsaid until they don't, because sometimes a secret becomes a threat. You remember the night that changed your sense of safety? A guest, new, untested, drinks too much and starts ranting about what really happened in a corporate merger. Names are dropped, threats implied, your smile tightens, your fingers grip the Sark bottle just a bit too hard. You glance at your Oni-san. She tilts her head ever so slightly. Leave, so you do. Later that night, after the guests have gone and the incense has burned down to ash, you sit together in the courtyard, eating rice crackers and watching the moon rise over the tiled roofs. "Did you hear it all?" she asks. You nod. She doesn't smile. "Don't tell the house, mother." You hesitate. Shouldn't she know? She sighs. She already does. But if she knows you know, it changes things. You eat the rest of your cracker in silence, the taste suddenly bitter. There's a strange detail you once read in an old geisha memoir, unpublished, passed between okiya like contraband. The author claimed that during World War II, geisha in Kyoto used their performances to signal coded messages between resistance sympathizers that a fan closed too quickly or a dance performed off-season meant something dangerous. No one can confirm it. It might just be myth. But you think about it often. About how performance can be protest. About how silence can scream. You begin to carry your secrets like armour. They make you sharper, more aware. When you walk into a room, you no longer see just silk and smoke. You see the shadows behind the words, the trembling underneath the laughter. You pour drinks with a steady hand, but your mind is busy mapping alliances and motives. And you're not alone. Every seasoned geisha you know has that same look in her eyes, a kind of elegant wariness. They know too much, and the ones who survive longest are the ones who keep knowing without ever telling. You begin to understand why so many geisha develop quirks. One twirls her comb obsessively, another hums under her breath when she's nervous. You bite the inside of your cheek when someone lies to your face. These are not habits, these are pressure valves, because you're not just performing anymore. You're watching, you're recording, you're remembering. And the strange thing is, sometimes they want you to remember, because secrets are only dangerous when they're disposable. When a powerful man knows you know something, you're no longer just entertainment. You're leverage, a quiet form of insurance, a living memory. That's when you realise something terrifying. You've become part of the machinery, not just the art, not just the illusion, but the whole clockwork of power. You are no longer on the edge of history, you're in it. And history, as you now understand, is written behind paper walls, in rooms where women in white makeup sit very still and never forget a single word. You never meant to fall in love. Not here, not like this, not while you're kneeling with perfect posture and smiling on cue and remembering which cup belongs to which client. But it happens anyway. Slips past your training, your layers of etiquette, your painted lips. He's not the most handsome man you've ever seen, but there's something in the way he looks at you that isn't hungry or possessive or calculating. It's quiet, curious, a little sad, and that sadness, for some reason, makes you lean in, just slightly. He's new to the Achaya, invited by a regular patron who introduces him like a novelty. "A writer," he says, laughing, as if that explains his worn jacket and soft voice. You note his hands, ink-stained fingers, bitten nails, and his hesitation as he accepts the cup of sake you offer. He bows too deeply, then apologizes with a smile. His Kyoto dialect is off. Not clumsy, just unpolished. You like that. It makes him real in a room full of rehearsed charm. You're supposed to forget him the moment he leaves, just like you forget all the others. You've trained yourself not to linger on names, voices, or compliments that don't come with coins or influence. But he sticks, like the scent of smoke in silk, like a word you can't quite translate. He returns, not often, not regularly, but enough, once every couple of weeks, always sitting quietly, always watching more than speaking. Sometimes he brings a book, and sometimes he just listens. When you dance, you don't dare glance at him, but you can feel it. That invisible thread, tugging between your sleeve and his silence. One night you serve him tea and ask softly, "Do you write about geisha?" He looks up, startled, not because of the question, but because you've spoken to him beyond small talk. He shakes his head. "Not yet," he says. "I'm still learning how not to believe the stories." It's the first time you've heard anyone say that out loud. After that, your conversations grow longer. You don't say much, you can't, but you choose your words with care. He notices everything. The callus on your shamisen finger, the way your smile shifts when a joke doesn't land, the hollow in your voice when you talk about seasonal dances. And then, one night, he offers you a letter, not in front of anyone, not with fanfare. Just a folded piece of paper slipped under your teacup. You hesitate, but you take it. Tuck it into your sleeve with a practiced flick, as if it were nothing more than a napkin. Later, alone in your room, you unfold it. It's not a love letter, not exactly. It's a small story. A fable about a crane who forgets she's a bird because she spends too long pretending to be a painting. At the end, she flies away and leaves a feather on the windowsill. You don't know if it's about you, but it's the first thing anyone has given you that isn't perfume or silk. You keep it hidden in the sleeve of an unused kimono. You start writing back, carefully, using rice paper and ink from your calligraphy lessons. You don't sign your name, you don't say anything direct, just small pieces of yourself disguised in metaphor. You hide the letters in the back garden beneath a stone by the plum tree. He leaves his replies folded beneath the bench where the shamisen teacher takes his breaks. It's reckless, stupid, and intoxicating. You imagine what would happen if the house mother found out, or your Oni-san, or your Dana. The thought freezes you, ends you really. Because love, true, messy, unprofitable love, is not part of the system. You're allowed affection, yes, even a kind of tenderness if it stays profitable. But real love, the kind that doesn't serve the house or the image, that's betrayal. And yet you keep writing. You tell yourself it's just a game. That you're practicing your poetry, that it'll pass. But then you start looking for him, listening for his laugh, adjusting your dance to make sure he sees the full turn of your wrist, and suddenly you're not pretending anymore. Kana notices first. Of course she does. She's seen it all. She corners you one night, while you're removing your hair ornaments. "You're glowing," she says, her tone unreadable. You don't reply. "Be careful," she adds, softer now. "They'll take it from you." You nod. You don't ask who they are. You already know. Here's a strange fact you once heard from an elderly tea-house hostess. In the Edo period, some geisha was secretly married, quietly, without ceremony, to men who couldn't be seen in public with them. They exchanged rings made of braided silk, hidden in the folds of their obi. Some stayed faithful for life. Others disappeared without a trace. No one wrote those stories down. They weren't good for business. And maybe that's your fate too. Something that can't be written, can't be said. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether geisha were ever allowed to choose love, whether the stories of romantic escape were propaganda or possibility. Some say love was discouraged to protect the illusion. Others believe it was simply a dangerous distraction from duty. Most agree on one thing: love rarely ended well. You feel that weight in your chest now. Every time you write to him, every time he replies, you've built something too fragile to name, and yet it grows, stubborn as moss. You never kiss, never touch, you don't even stand too close. But one evening he tells you, you make the room feel different. And that's all it takes. You feel yourself bloom and break at the same time. That night, you write your longest letter yet. Is not a confession, just a list of things you miss. Rain without obligation, music you choose, laughter that isn't followed by bowing, your real name. You sign it with a drawing of a feather. But when you go to leave it under the garden stone, you stop. You stare at the folded paper, your hands trembling. Then you tuck it back into your sleeve. You sit under the plum tree for a long time, watching the wind stir the blossoms like snow. You never deliver the letter. Some things are too precious to risk, even for love, especially for love. The offer arrives wrapped in silk, tied with a red cord and placed beside your futon before sunrise. No name, no note, just the colours, red and gold. You know what they mean immediately. Your mizuage has been arranged. You sit in silence for a long time, staring at the bundle, half expecting it to vanish if you blink. But it doesn't. It waits patiently, like a truth you've spent years preparing for but still aren't ready to face. You reach out, untie the cord, and unfold the fabric slowly, like it might bite. Inside is a fresh silk obi, pale pink with embroidered lotus blossoms. It smells faintly of incense and lavender. At the bottom is a delicate hairpin you've never seen before, tortoiseshell inlaid with gold. You run your finger across the curve of it, and it pricks you. A single drop of blood beads at your fingertip. You wipe it on your sleeve. Later that morning, the house mother confirms it with the same casual tone she uses when assigning you a new dance to learn. The arrangement is made, the patron is reputable, the price generous. There is no discussion, no ceremony, just a nod. Your stomach knots, but you nod too. This is how it goes. Every maiko knows the ritual, even if no one ever explains it plainly. Mizuage is supposed to mark your transition into full womanhood, the moment your apprenticeship ends and you become a geisha. Officially, it's a symbolic offering, a selling of your hairstyle, your image, your transformation, but everyone knows what it really means. It means your virginity has been sold. You're not supposed to call it that, you're supposed to call it tradition, and maybe, 100 years ago, that's all it was. Ceremony, not transaction. But times changed. Somewhere along the way, symbolism gave way to reality. The word stayed, but the meaning blurred. There's debate about this even now. Some historians argue that mizuage was never sexual, that it was simply a financial gesture to mark a young woman's graduation. Others insist it absolutely involved a sexual relationship with the chosen patron, often arranged by the okiya. The truth, as always, lives in the shadows. You've known girls who insisted nothing happened. You've known others who wept for weeks. The only certainty is that no one speaks of it once it's over. You don't know who the man is yet, only that he's wealthy, middle-aged, and quietly influential, not your Dana. Someone else, someone new, a businessman with a reputation for keeping his word and paying in full. That last part is mentioned twice. Kana finds you later that night, brushing your hair with the short, aggressive strokes. "They told me," she says. You don't look up. "I suppose I should say congratulations," she adds, more softly. "But I won't." You nod. She sits beside you on the tatami, pulls the brush from your hands and takes over. "When it happened to me," she begins, "I wore a pink kimono and cried the whole morning before." She pauses. "Not because I was scared, because I didn't feel anything at all." You finally look at her. She smiles, but only with her mouth. "You'll be fine," she says. "Just remember, it's not you they're buying. It's the idea of you." But what if the idea is all you have left? You remember your first year as a shikomi, watching older maiko whisper about their mizuage, half in awe, half in dread. It always sounded mythical, distant, dramatic, like something from a play. You never imagined it would arrive so quietly, with no warning, in the shape of a silk-wrapped bundle. The following days are a blur. You're fitted for a new kimono. Your makeup changes subtly. Your collar, once red, shifts to pure white, signalling you're nearing transition. Guests begin to compliment you differently. Not as a girl in training, but as a woman nearing full flower. Their eyes linger a beat longer. Their smiles change shape. You feel it all in your spine. You're taken to a secluded tea house for the night. The details of the arrangement are never said aloud, but everything is in place. The room is quiet. The futon has already been laid out. You bathe, dress, apply your makeup slowly. You've danced for hours in public. You've played the shamisen till your fingers bled. But none of that prepared you for this performance. The man is polite, soft-spoken, old enough to be your father. He removes his shoes with care and bows to you with what might be sincerity. He thanks you for the honour. You try to smile, but your face feels wrong. The details beyond that blur, whether it was kindness or obligation, whether it hurt or didn't, whether you left your body or stayed inside it, memorising every shadow on the ceiling, all you know is that when it's over, you bow again. He hands you a folded envelope. You accept it. You return to the okiya just before dawn, your face bare, your kimono folded neatly in your arms. No one greets you. You go to your room, sit on the tatami, and breathe. You don't cry. You don't smile. You just sit. The next day, your hair is styled differently for the first time in years. Your shoulders ache from the new ornaments. The house mother calls you geisha for the first time. You nod. You bow. You perform that evening as if nothing has changed. But everything has. There's a strange fringe belief that mizuage was originally a ritual borrowed from old water drawing ceremonies in Kyoto. that the name comes from a term for pulling sacred water from a well, the first draw of something valuable. Some believe it was once spiritual, pure, others say that's just a poetic gloss over a deeply transactional act. You like the well story better, but it doesn't change how you feel when you look in the mirror and see the new woman staring back. You've crossed a threshold that can't be undone, and the silence surrounding it is louder than anything you've ever heard. You first see them on a spring afternoon, foreigners, not just one or two, but a whole wave, walking through Gyeon with wide eyes and loud voices, pointing at the lanterns, the tiled roofs, the narrow alleys. You're walking with your Oni-san to a tea engagement when one of them stops, lifts a camera, and clicks before you can turn away. No bow, no permission, just a flash and a grin, like you're a zoo exhibit that wandered into public view. You feel your Oni-san tense beside you. Her smile doesn't change, but her hand tightens ever so slightly on her fan. You keep walking. The click still echoes behind you. Inside the tea house, the clients are different, so now? You used to perform for retired politicians and Kyoto industrialists who spoke in coded tones and never said too much. Now there's a growing number of foreign guests, businessmen from London, investors from New York, students from Berlin, who've read memoirs of a geisha too many times. They mean well, most of them. But the questions are always the same. So do you actually sleep with the clients? Is this like a fancy form of escorting? You must hate wearing that makeup all the time. You smile, politely, every time. Your training doesn't allow for sarcasm, though you sometimes fantasize about answering in ways that would burn the room down. But instead you laugh lightly and say, geisha are artists, not companions. Or, we perform tradition. It is different from Western ideas. Or if you're tired and your Oni-san isn't listening, only on Tuesdays. They laugh. You smile, you pour the sake. You lose count of how many times you have to explain that geisha does not mean prostitute. The confusion isn't new. During the Allied occupation, American soldiers coined the term geisha girls to refer to sex workers in Japan, many of whom dressed in imitation kimono and worked in bars that catered to soldiers. The real geisha of that era hated it. The term stuck anyway. One careless word, and your entire history becomes distorted in the global imagination. And then, of course, came the novel, Memoirs of a Geisha. You read it out of curiosity one night, lying on your futon with a borrowed copy, the paper edges softened by too many hands. The writing is elegant, the world it paints is lush, but something in it tastes wrong, sweet but hollow, like sugar candy shaped into the form of your life but missing the weight. And the truth. You close the book halfway through, you never finish it. You begin to notice the impact everywhere. Young tourists now walk through Kyoto in rented kimono, teetering in zori sandals too big for them, snapping selfies and tagging themselves as geisha for a day. You pass them on your way to the tea house, your real kimono heavy, your face aching beneath perfect layers of paint. They laugh and twirl in front of shop windows. No one corrects them. One evening, a teenage girl in line at a cafe spots you and gasps. "Look, a real one," she says, pulling her friend toward you. You nod politely and try to step away, but she follows, phone raised. "Can I take a picture? Please, I won't touch." You consider saying no. You want to say no, but you don't. Instead, you hold your fan just below your chin and allow the photo. Later, when the tea house lights are dimmed and the laughter fades, you think about how it felt. Not cruel, just small, a tiny erosion of self. Kana finds you later in the hallway, applying cream to your wrists. She watches you a moment and then asks, "Do you think they'll ever understand?" You shrug. "Or maybe we're meant not to be understood," she adds. "Maybe that's part of the spell." You want to agree. You want to believe there's power in the mystery. But part of you just feels tired. There's a strange scholarly take you once heard. Something fringe, whispered at a university lecture you weren't supposed to be attending. That the global image of the geisha is not a lie exactly, but a fetishized translation. A soft focus version of a complex reality designed to appeal to foreign tastes. Not unlike sushi rolls wrapped in avocado or samurai turned into anime. It's not that they're false, it's that they've been flattened, simplified, made consumable. You feel flattened sometimes too. The guests don't mean harm, they just want to see the magic. And you are the magic, you are the fan that opens and closes. The kimono that rustles when you walk, the bow, the dance, the mystery. No one wants to hear about the blisters on your heels or the way your scalp throbs after 4 hours beneath a wig. They want the image, the story, and you give it to them because you must. But then, one night, after a party with a group of European diplomats, a woman approaches you as the others file out. She's older, her suit is sharp, her gaze steady. "You don't have to answer this," she says, "but do you ever wish they just saw you as a person?" You stare at her for a second, unsure if it's a trap. Then you bow. "Sometimes," you say, "but it's hard to know what that even means anymore." She smiles, gently, like someone who's been mistaken for an object before, and slips out into the night. That moment lingers with you for days. You start watching your own reflection more closely after that. Not in the full white paint, but in the fragments. Just the eyes, just the mouth, just the skin before it disappears under ritual. You try to remember what you looked like before all this began. That girl who arrived with sore knees and a suitcase too heavy to carry. But her image keeps slipping away, covered in powder, lost in translation. Still, you keep performing, because performance is what remains. You speak slowly, you pour carefully, you answer gently when asked if geisha are still a thing in Japan. You explain for the 100th time that no, you're not for sale, not anymore. And you tell yourself with a little more effort each time that being misunderstood doesn't erase the truth, it just means you have to carry it alone. There's a new sound in the distance tonight, low and steady, like thunder that forgot how to finish rumbling. You hear it while tying your obi, while brushing on the red tint that curves your lips into something elegant and unreadable. It doesn't belong to the tea house or the markets or even the shrines. It's distant, unfamiliar, mechanical. You pause, listen. Then Kana knocks on your door and says, "Don't worry, it's just the air raid drills." You swallow, nod, and return to your mirror. Wartime has a way of creeping in without being invited. It starts subtly. Rationed rice, whispered curfews, guests cancelling last minute because of train delays. Then the conversations in the tea rooms begin to shift. Less poetry, more politics. Less laughter, more tension beneath the surface, thick as wet silk. The guests still come, the geisha still perform, the shamisen still plays, but everything feels brittle, as though one wrong note might shatter the illusion for good. You perform as usual that evening. The air is humid, your kimono heavy. Your dance is slow, reverent, a seasonal piece about spring returning after a long winter. It feels ironic, almost cruel considering the mood in the room. A general sits at the centre of the group, quiet and stern, his eyes narrowed, not in admiration but in calculation. He doesn't clap when you finish, he simply nods. It's not approval, it's acknowledgement. You bow and return to your corner. Later, a young officer too drunk for his own good raises his glass and says, "Even in times like this, beauty still survives, eh?" He laughs. No one joins him. Someone quietly changes the subject. Backstage, you loosen your obi and sit on the tatami floor. Your feet ache. Your chest does too, but not from dancing, from pretending, from keeping the spell intact while everything outside begins to crack. The next morning, the Okiyo is buzzing. 2 clients have withdrawn their patronage, citing instability. One has left Kyoto entirely. You overhear the house mother speaking in clipped tones about budget cuts. Your next new kimono is postponed. Your hairdresser cancels his visit. Everyone pretends this is temporary, that nothing is really changing, but everyone knows. The illusion is expensive and the economy is bleeding. You keep performing, even when the lights flicker during a tea ceremony, even when you hear a plane pass overhead and everyone pauses, uncertain whether to laugh or run. The guests still want entertainment, still want escape. In fact, they need it more than ever. One evening, a high-ranking guest pulls you aside. He smells like tobacco and desperation. "You geisha are lucky," he says. "You don't have to fight. Just smile. Just dance. So simple." You want to slap him. Instead, you smile, you nod, you say, "Yes, it's simple." But it's not, because every performance now is a gamble. You don't know who's watching, who's listening. You don't know which poems are now considered subversive. You don't know if the fan gesture you've used for years now resembles something political. You've begun editing yourself without realizing it. Skipping verses, softening stories, silencing edges. Kana starts sleeping less. You find her awake at odd hours, sitting in the corridor staring at the garden. "It's quieter than it should be," she says once. "Even the wind sounds afraid." You start hiding things, food, letters. You take your most treasured keepsakes, an old ribbon from your mother, a haiku written in your own hand, and wrap them in cloth beneath the floorboards, just in case. You learn to live like a shadow of yourself, then the first bomb falls. Not in Kyoto, not yet. but close enough to feel it. Osaka burns and the news ripples through the city like cold water on hot skin. You hear it at the market, see it in the eyes of the guests who no longer linger after parties. People begin to disappear, some conscripted, others fleeing. The okiya grows emptier, the schedule grows thinner. Still, the geisha perform, because tradition must survive. That's the line. That's what the house mothers say when they ration your meals, but insist the tea ceremony go on. That's what the old patrons say when they appear once a week instead of 3. That's what you whisper to yourself when you powder your face and your stomach growls. One afternoon during a performance, the sirens begin, loud, shrill, unmistakable. You're halfway through a dance, you freeze, so does the shamisen player, no one moves. Then a voice shouts from the hallway, "Drill!" You finish the dance anyway. It doesn't matter that everyone's heart is racing, that the rhythm has been shattered. You finish because geisha finish. You bow and leave the room. Only then do you breathe. There's an obscure wartime document, a scholar once told you about it, detailing how geisha houses were designated as cultural preservation centres during certain bombing campaigns, supposedly spared, protected. But you also hear stories of okiya in Tokyo turned to ash, girls buried in silk beneath collapsed roofs. No warning, no record, so you don't count on protection. You don't count on anything. You become quieter, more watchful, your fan movements sharper, less poetry, more silence. The guests seem to appreciate it. No one wants to talk, they want to forget. One day a client doesn't show up, then another, then another. A week passes, you perform for an empty room, out of habit more than hope. Kana watches you, arms crossed, her eyes unreadable. "We're not performers anymore," she says. "We're ghosts." You don't reply, 'cause she's not wrong. But then something strange happens. A client returns, then another. A tea house down the street reopens after weeks of silence. A few musicians reappear, their instruments dusty but their hands steady. The war hasn't ended, not yet, but people are clinging to whatever beauty they can find, even if it's just the echo of a fan opening in a quiet room. You dance that night like it matters, not for the guests, not for the house, for yourself, because if everything burns, you want to go down remembering what it felt like to be graceful, if only for 3 minutes. There's a story Kana tells you, one she says she heard from her Onisan, that during a bombing in Tokyo, a geisha performed her final dance in a burning tea house surrounded by ash. That she finished with her fan held high, smiling even as the roof fell, is probably not true, but you believe it anyway, because some illusions are worth dying for. The fire starts quietly, a hiss and crackle beneath the eaves of your okiya. You're brushing your hair in the early morning light when the first wisp of smoke curls into your room. At first you think it's incense gone wrong, a careless candle left near the tatami, but the smell is sharper, acrid, full of wood and ash. You freeze, listening. The crackling grows louder. Down the hall, a shout. Someone screams, "Fire!" And suddenly every practice motion you've learned for years is thrown into chaos. You grab your kimono, yanking it over your body with one hand while clutching your small bundle of personal items in the other. The Oni-san appears, face pale, hair undone, fumbling to pull the younger Maiko toward the stairwell. The smoke is thick, the floorboards beneath your feet glow faintly red. The air tastes like metal. You cough, stumble, choke, but keep moving. Every step feels surreal, as if the world has shrunk to the length of your shadow. Outside, the city is waking to chaos. Flames lick the wooden rooftops. Smoke curls into the sky like black ribbons against the pink morning. Other okiya have already begun to evacuate. Their girls running barefoot across the cobblestones, clutching hairpins, fans and obi. The fire spreads faster than anyone expects. You see a window collapse above you, splinters raining down. A client from a neighbouring tea house helps you onto the street. You bow deeply, coughing through tears, unable to speak. You huddle in the alleyway with your Oni-san and the other Maiko, wrapped in borrowed cloaks and blankets from neighbours. Some of the younger girls cry openly, their trained smiles melted away. You try not to look back, though you know the okiya, the home you've known since childhood, is likely gone. The smell of burning wood and lacquer fills the air, thick and almost intoxicating. You taste ash on your tongue, and yet amidst the terror there is movement. You notice how the seasoned Maiko, your Onisan among them, organises the younger girls, assigning who carries what, who guides the children, who watches the street for falling beams. No one panics beyond reason. Chaos is acknowledged, but structure remains. You realise it's not just training in dance and performance that prepared you, it's survival instinct honed by years of discipline. Later, when the fire is finally under control, the neighbourhood gathers. The Okaya is a ruin. Blackened beams, collapsed roofs, ash where tatami once lay. But somehow everyone has survived. Not unharmed. Some with scorched sleeves, burned hair, or blisters on their feet, but alive. You sit on the curb holding your bundle, watching the smoke curl into the morning sky. The world smells of loss, but also of endurance. Your Oni-san kneels beside you. She doesn't speak for a long time. Then softly, "We rebuild." The statement isn't a suggestion, it's a command. And yet, in the quiet weight of it, there's reassurance. Not because everything will be the same, it won't, but because you survived. You're still here. The next days are filled with reconstruction. Friends and neighbours bring food, tools, even scraps of fabric. You help sweep ash, carry beams, salvage what you can. The process is exhausting, physically and emotionally. You find yourself thinking of the ceremonies you've danced, the clients you've served, the secrets you've held. In the midst of literal ruins, you recognise the metaphor. Geisha life is built on layers, fragile but resilient. Every bow, every fan flick, every subtle glance, these are practices in endurance. There's a story whispered among the older geisha. During fires in Edo, some okiya would rebuild on the same plots of land, brick by brick, wood by wood, refusing to abandon tradition. Sometimes years later, the rebuilt houses were more elaborate, stronger, more beautiful. Sometimes they were simply ruins again, waiting for the next chance to rise. The lesson is clear: survival requires adaptation, and sometimes patience is as much art as dance. That night, after the last charred beams are cleared, you finally sit down to reapply your makeup. Your cheeks are still dusty, your lips cracked from smoke. You spread the oshiroi slowly, feeling the ritual as grounding. The fan you carry trembles slightly in your hand, but you compose yourself. You bow to the mirror, fully aware that the reflection staring back at you carries the weight of what's been lost, but also the faintest flicker of determination. And then you practice your dance, one smooth, measured movement after another. Each step on the uneven floor teaches you balance. Each turn of the fan reminds you that grace isn't always about beauty, it's about control, about presence, about perseverance. For a few minutes you forget ash and fire and fear. You're just the music, the rhythm, the motion, you're alive. A quirky detail emerges in conversation among the house mothers in the following days. In some Edo-era okiya, surviving a fire was considered a sign of favour from the kami, a blessing for the household. It was believed that those who endured were chosen to carry the tradition forward, like reeds bending but never breaking. You hear it and can't help but think of the parallel. Maybe it's superstition, maybe it's hope. Either way, it feels like a promise. You lie down that night, exhausted, soot on your hands, and listen to the city. Somewhere a shamisen plays, tentative and hesitant, but alive. You close your eyes and feel the weight of everything, the fire, the loss, the resilience. You realise that life as a geisha is not just about art or performance or devotion. It's about enduring, adapting and finding beauty even in ash. And you are still standing. The thought of escape enters your mind quietly, like a gust of wind slipping through a half-open shoji screen. You're sitting on the roof of the okiya's temporary shelter, staring at the blackened horizon where smoke still rises from the ruins. For the first time in years, you imagine a life beyond these walls, beyond the kimono, the fans, the performances. Maybe a small town in the countryside. Maybe a train to Tokyo, somewhere you are just yourself. Not a geisha, not a symbol, not a performer. Just free. But the fantasy is always tempered by reality. Your contract, the debts owed to the okiya, the lessons paid for with painstaking labour and money borrowed from patrons. Freedom, as it turns out, is expensive. And then there's the knowledge that leaving wouldn't just affect you. It would ripple outward, disrupting the lives of younger maiko who rely on the house, threatening the delicate web of arrangements, obligations and reputation carefully maintained for decades. You've been trained to be indispensable, and that binds you more tightly than any chain. Still you plan, quietly. At night, when the house is dark and the cicadas hum like a slow pulse, you sketch routes in your mind, the alleyways you know by heart, the train stations, the inns along the way. You imagine slipping out under the cover of dawn, kimono hidden beneath a borrowed coat, fan concealed like contraband. You plan for obstacles, for guards, for the clients who might ask questions. You count the steps to freedom like breaths, 1, 2, 3, each a careful calculation, each a potential betrayal. The physical risks are obvious. Your feet, blistered and scarred from years of dancing in heavy zori, would make stealth difficult. Your hands, trained to be delicate, would have to carry burdens larger than you've ever lifted. And the emotional cost, leaving behind the okiya, your oni-san, the only family you've known since childhood, is almost unbearable. You're torn between longing and loyalty, between survival and duty, between desire and the unspoken rules that govern your existence. And yet every night you rehearse the idea. You imagine the first few steps, the rush of air against your face, the uncertainty and exhilaration of disappearing. Each time your heart pounds not from performance but from hope. You imagine being just a girl in the wind, not a living painting for someone else's admiration. The possibility is intoxicating. Then reality intervenes. Kana, who has been your constant shadow and sometimes your conscience, catches you one night scribbling a map under candlelight. Her expression is unreadable. For a moment you fear she will report you, will tell the house mother, will end everything you've dared to imagine. But instead, she sits beside you and traces a finger along your lines. "You're serious," she says quietly. You nod. She doesn't say anything else. But later in the corridor she mutters, "Be careful. Freedom is a clever thief." The thought lingers like the scent of incense that never quite leaves the room. You realise that even planning escape is a performance of its own. Every breath, every glance, every step must be calculated. Even your dreams are no longer entirely yours. They are rehearsed, precise, as though failing in imagination would be just as disastrous as failing in reality. You wonder about the girls who tried before you. The stories are whispered, some ended in shame, some in disappearance, others in tragic, unrecorded deaths. No one ever documents their courage or fear. Their names fade. Their lessons are etched only in silence. You carry that knowledge like a weight heavier than any obi or fan. It humbles you, terrifies you, strengthens you. There's also the strange, fringe fact you've heard from an elder in Gion. Some maiko who successfully escaped would return years later, older and disguised, just to observe the house and the streets they left behind. No one confronted them. No one betrayed them. They were ghosts, living in memory, invisible but present. The thought fascinates you. The idea that one could leave yet remain sparks both longing and dread. As you rehearse your escape again that night, you feel the quiet thrill of possibility and the sting of constraint simultaneously. The wind blows against the temporary roof, lifting stray petals from the ruined courtyard below. For a moment the horizon seems wide, endless. Freedom is tantalizingly close yet always just out of reach. The idea becomes an undercurrent in everything you do, each step in your dance, each measured bow, each careful pouring of sake. It's a delicate balance. A dance without music. The art of running away, practiced in shadows and whispered thought, mirrors the life you already lead. A life of discipline, patience, and endless calculation. You realise that perhaps planning escape is the truest expression of desire you are allowed to have. Silent, private, hidden, but alive, and you clutch that desire like a secret fan, folded neatly in your sleeve, waiting for the right moment to unfurl. The story of Mineko Iwasaki reaches you slowly, carried through whispers from Tokyo, and the rumours that drift down the cobblestone alleys like petals in autumn. You've heard pieces before, her fame, her skill, her memoir, but never the truth. When you finally read her account carefully, quietly, you feel a tug of recognition, a strange kinship. Here is someone who lived a life parallel to yours, yet her words are laced with the friction of betrayal, the bitterness of misunderstanding. She speaks of her oni-san, of clients, of painstaking artistry and political games, but also of the chasms between reality and fiction, the stories outsiders tell versus the lives insiders live. You notice how much the world wanted her story sanitized, simplified, romanticized. Tourists and scholars alike seized the image of geisha as something timeless, graceful, and above all harmless. The narrative removes the blood, the debt, the blisters, the sacrifices, the quiet suffering. It erases the layers of labour and restraint that define you, and yet her memoirs insist on truth, raw and unyielding. You find yourself nodding at her words, recognising the familiar ache of carrying a life weighed down by expectation, admiration and secrecy. But there's controversy too. Some historians and former geisha claim Iwasaki's account exaggerated or omitted details, portraying herself as a victim of the very system she navigated masterfully. Others argue she unveiled truths long kept in the shadows, providing insight into an era and art form misunderstood even in Japan. You reflect on the delicate balance, to be both celebrated and silenced, to be both praised and critiqued, to have your life discussed as a spectacle without your consent. You recognise the risk she took in speaking out and the courage it required. Her story resonates with you, particularly into moments of quiet reflection. After long days of performance, when the room smells faintly of incense and the red lantern light flickers across your face, you consider her choices. She navigated fame, managed rivalry, and endured the expectations of patrons while maintaining her sense of self, however narrow and constrained that self might have been. You wonder if you would have made the same decisions, if the sacrifices she documents would have felt necessary to you, or if freedom would have tempted you more fiercely, as it does now in the shadows of your own life. There's also the cautionary aspect of her tale. You think of the repercussions she faced: personal privacy invaded, professional relationships strained, friendships fractured. The system, beautiful and brutal, demands silence, loyalty and performance. Speaking the truth outside the house carries risks both immediate and long-lasting. Yet it is precisely this honesty that keeps the art alive, that preserves the reality behind the myth. You feel the weight of her legacy pressing gently against your spine, reminding you of your own place in the continuum of geisha life, both as participant and witness. A fringe story you hear from a retired maiko adds texture to her account. Supposedly, Iwasaki once walked into a rival tea house during a high-stakes banquet, smiled, and subtly rearranged the seating order with nothing more than her presence and a tilt of her head. The manoeuvre wasn't documented, but the anecdote circulates as proof of the unseen influence geisha could wield in a male-dominated society. You marvel at it, imagining the power in subtlety, the quiet authority that comes from perfect knowledge of rules and timing, the capacity to shape outcomes while remaining a shadow. You start examining your own manoeuvres with fresh scrutiny. How you pour sake, how you tilt your head, how you adjust a fan or bow. Every motion becomes both art and strategy. You consider the unspoken consequences of your actions, the subtle ways you influence clients, peers, and patrons alike. You begin to see the house, the city, and even the larger networks of cultural power as an intricate game board. Each step calculated, each gesture meaningful. You realise that your own story, like Iwasaki's, is part of a larger narrative. Misunderstood, romanticised, contested, and above all alive. And yet, there's a comfort in her words. Someone survived, someone thrived, someone carried the weight of myth and expectation without losing entirely the essence of self. You feel a quiet determination rise inside you, a subtle fuel that bolsters your resolve. There's validation in her courage, a roadmap of sorts, showing that while the path is narrow, treacherous, and burdened with tradition, survival, and even agency remains possible. So you continue. You dance, you bow, you pour, you listen, you watch, and between each motion you carry her story as an echo, a reminder that the world sees only the performance, but you, like she did, carry the truth. You find yourself reading memoirs and accounts late at night, long after the lanterns have dimmed and the city has hushed. The room smells faintly of camellia oil and old wood. You trace the edges of your teacup as you absorb stories not meant for outsiders, tales of rivalry, triumph and quiet despair. One book sits open on your futon, the famous memoir that reshaped global perceptions of geisha life. The narrative is captivating, lush and tragic, but it leaves out so much. You realise that what the world sees is a distilled version of centuries of work, discipline and sacrifice. The intricacies, the personal costs, the substitute strategies, even the whispered heartbreaks, they are all missing. Reduced to romanticised images of silk and fan gestures, it makes you consider your own performance. Every bow, every measured word, every flick of your fan isn't just art, it's a language meant to maintain a story the outside world expects. And yet, behind the polished exterior, your life is full of untold truths, The long nights of training, the physical pain, the silent negotiations with clients, the nuanced dance of influence and discretion. You begin to see your existence as simultaneously a performance for others and a hidden narrative only you understand. There is empowerment in this duality, but also a quiet grief, a sense of constant calculation that never truly ends. Reading about the memoir's omissions sparks a kind of rebellion in your mind. You start keeping notes, small private observations about daily life, about clients, about events that shift behind the paper screens. You fold these notes neatly and hide them in your kimono sleeve, in the lining of your obi. They are not for anyone else, not your Oni-san, not your house mother. They are for you, a small assertion of ownership over your story, however modest. You feel a strange thrill in this act. It is private, subversive, and intimate, a rebellion executed in silence. At the same time, you recognize the tension between public image and private reality. You smile for clients even when your heart is heavy. You laugh lightly at jokes that fall flat, and you adjust your gestures for aesthetic balance rather than comfort. There's a sharp edge to your awareness now. Every interaction, every expression, every movement carries potential consequence. You're no longer just performing tradition. You are navigating power, history, and perception simultaneously. Each action is a test of skill, patience, and subtle negotiation. And sometimes you feel like a tightrope walker on a stage where the audience is invisible but omnipresent. The memoir also reminds you that geisha are often remembered for the glamour rather than the grind. Tourists, scholars, and even locals praise elegance, composure, and artistic mastery, while remaining blissfully unaware of the cost. You begin to think about how often the world conflates appearance with reality. How many observers mistake endurance for ease, labour for leisure, and submission for freedom. You realise that your own story could easily be misunderstood in the same way. That makes you wary, that makes you deliberate, that makes you more precise. You also find comfort in the contradictions presented by the memoir. The author's account is both celebratory and confessional, exposing beauty and brutality in equal measure. You take solace in knowing that it is possible to navigate these contradictions, to perform with excellence, while still acknowledging the hidden burdens that accompany it. There is a lesson here. You can be admired without being entirely seen, respected without being entirely understood, and powerful without appearing to wield power overtly. A quirky detail catches your attention. In one anecdote was a famous geisha arranged subtle gestures during a banquet that indirectly influence political outcomes. A flick of a fan here, a pause in conversation there, tiny motions interpreted only by those attuned to nuance. Some scholars debate whether these actions were intentional or coincidental, but the story underscores a profound truth you feel in your bones. Observation and subtlety can be more powerful than overt action. Every movement you make carries layers of meaning you are only beginning to comprehend. As you close the book and set it aside, you reflect on your own dual existence, the visible and the hidden, the public persona and the private self. The memoir is not perfect. It is selective, shaped by memory and circumstance, yet it validates something fundamental. It reminds you that your life too is worth recording, even if only for yourself, even if only in the quiet folds of a kimono, or the shadowed pages of a journal no one will ever read. The recognition of your own experience, its complexity, and its unspoken truths becomes a small private victory. You lie back on the futon, your body heavy from the day's practice and your mind alert with observation. You think of the lessons gleaned from stories of the past, the perseverance, the strategy, the hidden resilience. The memoir has not answered all your questions, nor resolved the tension between tradition and individuality, but it has illuminated a path. To survive, to flourish, to exist fully within and beyond the gaze of the world. You close your eyes, aware that tomorrow you will return to the dance floor, to the tea ceremonies, to the ritualized beauty, carrying both the weight of reality and the carefully curated illusion. You step into a modern okiya and immediately notice what hasn't changed, and what has. The sliding doors, the narrow corridors, the faint scent of incense, the weight of history pressing softly against your shoulders. All familiar, comforting, oppressive. Yet there's something different about this house. New floors gleam with varnish instead of decades-old patina. The tea set glints under electric lighting instead of flickering lanterns. A few girls carry smartphones tucked into their obi, the devices buzzing silently like insects trapped under silk, the juxtaposition strange, unsettling and exhilarating all at once. You follow a current maiko as she prepares for her first ozushiki of the evening. She's a curious mix of tradition and modernity. Kimono folds precise, hair ornaments authentic, makeup flawless, but there's a subtle tension in her eyes, a nervous awareness that her performance is being documented in ways you never imagined. Tourists will take photos, perhaps stream the scene online. Clients might be recording for reference. The audience isn't confined to the room anymore. It stretches across cities, countries, continents. The stakes are higher. The scrutiny sharper. The margin for error thinner. Watching her, you feel a pang of empathy and recognition. This is exactly how it felt for you decades ago. Learning every fold of the kimono, every flick of the fan, every note of the shamisen. The rituals are unchanged, but the world watching has expanded beyond comprehension. You notice how the Oni-san quietly coaches the younger girl, reminding her to maintain poise even when her phone vibrates beneath her sleeve, reminding her to mask any uncertainty behind a practiced smile. The lessons are the same, but the pressures multiply, tangled now with technology, tourism and global attention. You observe the maiko dancing. Her movements are crisp, flawless, yet you detect subtle hesitations, tiny falters that reveal both excitement and fear. She's performing for an audience she cannot see. Every gesture carries dual meaning, the ritualized messages embedded in the fan, the tilt of her head, the shift of her shoulders. These cues are learned over years of apprenticeship. You remember the first time you understood the language of movement, the thrill of mastery, the quiet terror of misstep. This girl is following that same path, yet under lights and lenses unimaginable in your youth. There is an odd, almost humorous contrast in this modern okiya. While tradition reigns supreme, new elements sneak into the choreography of daily life. A teacher reminds a student to smile for the camera that a foreign journalist holds just outside the sliding doors. Another maiko checks the time on her smartphone before stepping onto the tatami, calculating lighting and timing in ways that were unnecessary in your day. You wonder how much of their elegance remains instinctive and how much has become conscious calculation, an overlay of digital awareness on centuries-old ritual. The house mother explains that even in this era, some aspects cannot change. The dances, the calligraphy, the shamisen all remain sacred. The fan gestures, the subtle nods, the pauses in conversation, still essential. But the audience's expectations have shifted. They want authenticity, but also spectacle. They want heritage, but also entertainment. It's a delicate balance, demanding the same mastery of observation and restraint you learned, with added layers of calculation and awareness. You notice a visitor, an elderly scholar from Kyoto, who observes silently from a corner. His notebook is filled with sketches and annotations, capturing postures and sequences, analysing the dance as data. This is a curious mix of admiration and intrusion. You remember similar scrutiny from your youth, but never so methodical, never so modern. The intent is not malicious, yet the effect is the same. Every motion is dissected, measured and codified. The art persists, but it is both observed and objectified in ways you could never have predicted. And yet despite the cameras, the smartphones, the scrutiny, the traditions endure. The maiko's body tells stories older than the walls themselves. The fan speaks secrets, the sleeves whisper nuances, the feet imprint rhythms onto the tatami that are both ancient and new. Watching her, you are reminded that the essence of the geisha, the discipline, the subtlety, the silent mastery remains intact. Modern pressures may have added complexity, but the foundation is unchanged. You see the resilience mirrored in your own reflection. You recognize the continuity, the lineage that carries forward your labor, your patience, your mastery. There's a sense of pride, quiet and unspoken, that despite modernization, despite shifting audiences and global perceptions, the heart of the geisha tradition beats steadily. The girls of today are heirs to an intricate, demanding and sacred art, one that has survived war, fire, economic upheaval, and the distortions of perception. And for a fleeting moment, you feel a calm satisfaction, the knowledge that you too were part of this continuum, a thread in a tapestry that stretches from the past into the future. Your lessons, your struggles, your silent endurance, these are not erased. They are embedded in every bow, every fanfon flick, every measured step that continues to animate the okiya. The art persists, living in bodies, gestures and eyes that still understand, still honour, still transmit the unspoken language you once mastered. You meet them in the quiet moments between performances. Young Maiko, whose faces are flawless, yet whose eyes betray the hours spent studying mirrors and fans and movements until the body remembers more than the mind. Their kimonos glint under the electric light, and their hair ornaments sparkle with a precision only centuries of tradition can demand. But the faint buzz of phones tucked discreetly into their obi reminds you that these girls inhabit two worlds at once. One ancient, one digital, one private, one broadcast. It's a strange juxtaposition, vivid, almost surreal, that draws your attention in a way both unsettling and fascinating. Some of these new maiko embrace the technology wholeheartedly. Social media accounts are carefully curated, featuring images of their performances, portraits of elaborate hairstyles, and glimpses of ritualized teas and dances. Likes and comments become an additional audience, a digital patronage, as powerful in its own way as the traditional dana or loyal clients who once kept Okiya afloat. You watch their faces light up when they read praise online, noting the subtle shift in posture and expression. The performance extends beyond the tatami, beyond the lantern-lit rooms, out into a world you never fully imagined. Others, however, resist. They treat the camera as a silent intruder, positioning themselves as if it were just another observer in the corner. Their eyes flash with awareness and defiance. You recognize that tension. It's the same instinct you carried as a young maiko, the desire to control how you're seen, the wariness of being misunderstood, the need to preserve the illusion while safeguarding the self beneath the layers of silk, paint and practice. The tools have tinged, but the challenge is timeless. How to remain autonomous while performing, how to exist within expectations without being consumed by them. You notice a peculiar detail during a rehearsal. One maiko, a striking girl, barely 15 too, pauses mid-dance to check a vibration in her sleeve, a subtle reminder of the digital world pressing in on her. She resumes her movement seamlessly, a testament to rigorous discipline and adaptability. It strikes you that the modern geisha must navigate even more complex layers of performance than you ever did. Tradition, observation, history, and now technology. Every movement must be precise, every gesture intentional, every glance meaningful, not just in person, but potentially broadcast online. The stakes feel almost dizzying, and yet you're fascinated by the ingenuity displayed. The integration of modernity into centuries-old art forms is not a dilution, but an evolution. Some girls have begun designing subtle choreography that works well for camera angles. Some incorporate minor contemporary flourishes while preserving the integrity of tradition. You see the same principles you mastered as a young maiko being applied with ingenuity: observation, subtlety, precision, patience, and strategic adaptation. The art is alive, but it has grown larger, extending beyond physical rooms into digital spaces and global perception. You observe the delicate balance between authenticity and performance. Social media followers are not clients, they are audiences who expect spectacle, yet cannot participate in the nuance of ritual. The maiko must offer them glimpses without exposing the reality beneath. You recognize the paradox immediately. The more transparent the performance, the more invisible the truth becomes. The girls negotiate this tension with skill, just as you once navigated the judgments of patrons, the politics of the okiya, and the silent rivalries within your cohort. The medium has changed, but the survival of the art demands the same mastery. At a tea engagement that evening, you notice how carefully the girls interact with tourists who mistake them for mere photo opportunities. Each bow, each tilt of the fan, each measured smile communicates respect without granting intimacy. They are objects of fascination, yet retain agency through disciplined gestures. You see echoes of your own training in their measured motions, the same lessons of control, awareness, and subtlety translated into a new era. The balance of power between observer and observed is shifting, yet the principles endure. The house mother offers quiet guidance throughout the night, reinforcing traditions while permitting subtle adaptations for the digital gaze. You must honour the past, she says, but remember, the world will always change faster than your feet can follow. Bend, but do not break. Her words resonate in the back of your mind, reminding you that resilience has always been central to the geisha identity. Enduring scrutiny, preserving nuance, and maintaining artistry amidst external pressures. You nod quietly, acknowledging that this principle remains unchanged, whether under lantern light or camera flash. Later, as you walk through the dim alleyways after the engagement, you feel the weight of continuity and change. The city hums with life, tourists chattering, neon reflections bouncing off wet cobblestones, Geisha disappearing into shadows. The line between past and present blurs, yet the essence of your world persists. Discipline, observation, subtlety, endurance, they are constants. Modernity may alter the tools, the audience, the optics, but the heart of the geisha tradition beats steadily within these girls and within you, as living proof that the art endures, alive and evolving. You notice how time itself feels different now. The days pass with a rhythm that blends old and new, lanterns glowing beside LED lamps, the smell of incense mingling with exhaust from nearby streets, the soft pluck of shamisen strings carried through alleys, while the distant hum of trains punctuates the evening. The juxtaposition is disorienting. You realise that tradition no longer exists in isolation. It is layered over modernity, and the past and present coexist in ways both beautiful and fragile. Walking through the tea house corridors, you feel yourself straddling two worlds, carrying the weight of memory while observing the unfolding present. One afternoon, a young student asks you about your experiences, wide-eyed and naive. "Is it true," she whispers, "that geisha used to perform only for powerful men?" You pause, considering your answer. The truth is complex. You explain that historically, geisha were entertainers skilled in art, conversation and ceremony. Patrons often included influential men, yes, but the role was never strictly transactional. The nuances, training, rivalry, artistry, secrecy, are invisible to outsiders, but essential to understanding the culture. The girl nods, absorbing every word as if trying to reconcile the images she's seen online with the reality you describe. You begin reflecting on your own journey, the relentless training, the sacrifices, the moments of quiet rebellion and private triumph. You remember the pressure of earning your first dana, the subtle manipulations of rival maiko, the hidden correspondence with a writer who had captured your imagination. Each memory folds into the next, creating a layered tapestry that only you can perceive fully. It strikes you that this complexity is what makes geisha life both exquisite and precarious. Beauty and power are inseparable from sacrifice, and the hidden labour beneath the surface is the heartbeat of the art. Even in modern times, you observe the persistence of these dynamics. A young maiko navigates her relationships with patrons, her obligations to the house and the silent competitions among her peers. You notice how she measures laughter, adjusts her posture, and modulates her voice to maintain the delicate balance between attention and distance. The skills you honed decades ago are alive in her motions, timing, subtlety, grace, and strategic silence. You see yourself reflected in her movements, like a mirror stretched across generations. There's a quiet humour in watching the blend of eras collide. A tourist snaps photos while texting a friend, oblivious to the gestures that convey centuries of tradition. A maiko responds with a perfectly timed smile, her eyes lowered just enough to satisfy etiquette. Her fan flicked delicately to obscure a hand trembling from exhaustion or nerves. The dance of performance, of visibility and invisibility, continues unabated, now layered with technology and global fascination. You recognise the same pressures you endured, amplified and refracted through modern lenses. At an evening engagement, you notice a subtle shift in the room's energy. A client, newly arrived from overseas, gazes at the maiko with reverence mixed with expectation, clearly seeking an image from the stories he's read. You watch the girl respond with all the precision of training, her gestures conveying deference, charm and artistry without compromise. The invisible language of fans, movements, and glances functions just as it did decades ago. Yet the audience is now larger, more dispersed and more aware, which adds an almost imperceptible tension to every step. You realise that this evolution is both thrilling and daunting. The art survives, but it is constantly renegotiating its boundaries. There's power in this adaptability. You notice the resilience in every gesture, the endurance in every carefully placed footfall, and the quiet intelligence in every smile or pause. Even as the world changes around them, the core of geisha life, discipline, subtlety, control and elegance, remain steadfast, passed from mentor to apprentice, preserved in every flick of a fan and every tilt of a head. A fringe historian once argued that modern geisha are performing twice, for the immediate guests and for an imagined global audience, a dual-layered reality that mirrors centuries-old negotiation and subtle influence. You see the truth in this as you watch the young maiko dance, perfectly balancing traditional expectations with modern awareness. The challenge is immense, yet the continuity is undeniable. You feel a quiet satisfaction knowing that the art endures, resilient and alive, carried forward by those who understand its weight and its beauty. As you retire to your room that night, you reflect on the threads that connect your past to the present, the rituals, the hardships, the triumphs, and the subtle strategies. The world has changed, yet the essence of geisha life persists, woven into the fabric of the city, the movements of the maiko, and the silent observances that survive even under the gaze of modernity. You lie down, feeling the familiar weight of both history and expectation, comforted by the knowledge that you are part of a living lineage, one that will continue to adapt and endure. You begin to notice the subtle differences in how foreign and local guests interact with the maiko. Tourists are loud, eager, intrusive in ways that defy the decorum you've been trained to uphold. They take selfies, ask too many questions, and occasionally misstep with gestures they think are harmless. You watch the maiko respond with grace, adjusting their fans just so, tilting their heads delicately, controlling their laughter. It's a choreography in itself, one that requires the same discipline as dance or shamisen. Meanwhile, local patrons approach quietly, observing customs and ritual with a reverence that feels heavier, almost tangible. The distinction fascinates you, the contrast between admiration rooted in curiosity versus tradition. Both require negotiation, but one demands more patience, the other more strategy. You spend the morning teaching a younger apprentice how to navigate this duality. The lesson is unspoken for the most part. Observe the client's intentions, measure their attention, respond subtly but deliberately. Smile, but know why, you tell her. She nods, shy but attentive, her fingers trembling around the edge of a fan. You remember your own lessons at that age, fumbling words, misaligned bows, misplaced glances, the humiliation, the correction, the slow internalization of the rules. You feel both nostalgia and a quiet pride watching her attempt to embody tradition while adjusting to new pressures. There's something alive in her struggle, something akin to the fire you once felt, tempered now by awareness but still present. By midday, the tea house is buzzing, clients chatter, utensils clink. The shamisen hums a familiar melody. You pour sake, your movements fluid and precise, mindful of timing, posture and gaze. Even in the chaos, there is control, a constant balancing act between expectation and autonomy. You notice small infractions, a maiko's sleeve brushing a tatami edge too soon, a fan held at an angle slightly off from the lesson. Correction is gentle, subtle, but immediate. The discipline is unrelenting, the precision uncompromising. And yet within the rigour, there is artistry, spontaneity, and room for the performer's intuition. You recognise the same interplay that shaped you, now alive in the next generation. Later, you watch as a group of tourists attempts to photograph the maiko mid-performance. The girls adjust, incorporate the cameras into their choreography seamlessly. They bend, turn and smile at just the right moments, maintaining elegance while acknowledging the modern gaze. You marvel at the dexterity required, performing for two audiences at once, one tangible, the other mediated by digital devices, while keeping every movement anchored in centuries of tradition. It reminds you of the subtle diplomacy inherent in geisha life. Every gesture a negotiation, every bow a statement, every glance a calculation. In the evening, a local historian visits, carrying a notebook filled with sketches and notes on posture, fan movements, and ceremonial sequences. He observes quietly, sometimes scribbling, sometimes pausing, silently cataloguing gestures that have existed unchanged for centuries. You watch the maiko respond, maintaining poise while the weight of observation presses upon them. The contrast between digital scrutiny and scholarly attention strikes you. One seeks spectacle, the other analysis. Both require adaptation, but each exerts pressure in different ways. You recognise that this is the world the modern geisha must navigate. Layered expectations, overlapping audiences, a constant need for vigilance and self-mastery. At the end of the day, you sit with the Oni-san on the back porch, sipping tea as the lanterns flicker, and the cicadas hum. She doesn't speak immediately. Instead, she watches the city, absorbing the subtle shifts in energy, listening to the quiet murmur of footsteps and voices drifting through alleys. Finally, she says, They are stronger than we were, and yet they carry the same weight. You nod, understanding the complexity, the training, the discipline, the endurance, all unchanged, yet magnified by modernity. It is continuity, evolution, and survival, intertwined in ways both delicate and powerful. You think about the girls you watch today, their concentration, subtle movements, and resilience. You realize that the essence of geisha life persists not despite change, but through it. The lineage, the teachings, the artistry all continue embedded in every gesture and choice. And as night falls, you feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. The tradition is alive, breathing, adapting, and poised to endure, carried forward in the hands, eyes, and hearts of those who understand its weight. You notice the tension in every glance now, the careful calculations beneath smiles that appear effortless. The younger maiko, despite their youth, have learned quickly to measure attention, to pace laughter, to tilt their heads just so. One wrong gesture, a dropped fan, a bowed head held too long, an unintended laugh, can ripple through the room and change the perception of their skill entirely. You recall your own first years, knees bruised, hands raw, voice trembling, learning the invisible codes that govern every interaction. Observation, timing, and silence are as important as any dance step, and you marvel at how these girls internalize the rules while maintaining the appearance of natural grace. The tea house is quieter this afternoon. A few local clients remain, sipping their cups of steaming matcha and observing with subdued curiosity. You move through the room, offering small gestures of hospitality, pouring sake, adjusting cushions, placing a fan in a client's hand with the precision of years of practice. The movements are familiar, comfortable, and yet each is charged with layers of meaning. A tilt here, a pause there, a fleeting glance across the tatami, it all communicates more than words ever could. You realize that this subtlety is the core of geisha life, influence achieved without overt assertion, power wielded through suggestion rather than declaration. Later, a new apprentice arrives, shy and hesitant, her hands trembling as she steps onto the polished floor. You see yourself in her immediately, the mixture of awe, fear, and determination. The Onisan guides her, whispering corrections and encouragements that are precise and deliberate. You join, demonstrating movements, correcting the tilt of a wrist, the angle of a fan, the placement of a bow. The apprentice absorbs everything, watching your hands, listening to your voice, trying to anticipate what is expected. In her, you see continuity, the same discipline you endured, the same devotion now alive in a new form. You feel pride tempered with empathy, knowing the road ahead will be long, exacting, and transformative. The sun dips behind the rooftops as an older client arrives unexpectedly, his presence adding a subtle tension to the room. You adjust automatically, a deeper bow, a slightly longer pause before pouring tea, a gentler smile. Every micro-movement is calculated to communicate attentiveness and respect without drawing unnecessary attention. You recognize the familiar rush of responsibility, the need to maintain control, to project composure, to navigate unspoken social hierarchies with the finesse of someone who has walked this path for decades. The room becomes a stage, and every action is part of a carefully choreographed performance. After the engagement, you walk with the Oni-san through the alleyways, the soft lantern light reflecting off wet cobblestones. She comments quietly on the apprentice's progress, noting both strengths and areas for improvement. You listen, absorbing the nuances of teaching and mentorship that are as vital to geisha culture as performance itself. Guidance, patience, and careful observation. These are lessons that cannot be rushed, and you understand that your own role has shifted from student to guardian of knowledge. There is a weight in this responsibility, subtle but persistent, echoing the discipline you inherited from your One-san. You think of the fragile balance between tradition and innovation. Technology, tourism, and global curiosity have altered the world outside, yet inside, the essence of the art persists. Dance, fan gestures, bowing, conversation, and ritual remain central, passed down with painstaking care. You see the younger girls adapt, learning to incorporate these modern pressures while honouring centuries of protocol. It is a testament to resilience, a living demonstration that culture evolves without losing its soul. Observation, patience, and subtlety remain paramount. That night, in the quiet of your room, you reflect on the continuum you've witnessed. The apprentices carrying lessons forward, the Oni-san guiding with quiet authority, the clients observing yet rarely understanding, and yourself bridging past and present. You feel the cumulative weight of experience, history, and responsibility resting in your shoulders. It is both a burden and a privilege. The life of a geisha is never merely performance. It is survival, adaptation, and the deliberate shaping of perception across generations. And as you close your eyes, you carry with you a sense of satisfaction, of continuity, and of hope for those who will follow. The final performance of the season arrives like a tide, sweeping through the tea house with a mix of anticipation and fatigue. Guests fill the room, some familiar, some new, their eyes bright with expectation, their hands clasped nervously over cups of steaming tea. You take your place feeling the familiar tension coil around your chest. Every movement must be precise, every gesture, every tilt of the fan, every pause of the voice carries the weight of the past months of training, every lesson from your wani-san, every secret you've kept, every observation recorded silently in the folds of memory. The room watches, unaware that you are as much a custodian of history as you are an entertainer. The music begins, soft and deliberate. Shamisen strings hum through the space, a familiar vibration that anchors you, that calls to memory and discipline alike. You lift the fan, the wooden silk cool against your fingers, and move. Each step echoes your lineage. Each gesture resonates with years of perfected nuance. You feel the presence of every maiko and geisha who train before you, their whispers of instruction folded invisibly into your motions. The dance is not simply performance, it is preservation. A language older than the city itself, spoken without a word. You sense the client's eyes, some curious, some analytical, others distant, but all part of the tableau. Each one interprets differently, unaware of the layers beneath the surface. One admires the elegance of your fan. Another notices the shift in your shoulders, a subtle signal of mastery. Behind them, unseen younger maiko watch intently, absorbing, learning, preparing for their own turn on the stage. You realize you are no longer just a performer. You are a bridge between eras, a living embodiment of tradition, responsibility, and mentorship. A rival maiko, Sumire, performs beside you tonight, each of you moving in harmony and tension, a duel wrapped in grace. The audience senses energy but not its source. Subtle glances, timing of pauses, and mirrored fan flicks communicate a silent dialogue between you. Rivalry here is refined, layered, and strategic, not destructive but instructive. It's a test, not just for the audience, but for you, for the lineage of training, for the delicate transmission of skill and wisdom. Every misstep could ripple outward, affecting perception, reputation, and the apprentice girls who emulate your every move. Yet with every coordinated turn and calculated pause, the dance strengthens both of you, revealing the power of disciplined competition. Later, after the performance, you gather with the apprentices. They shyly approach, hesitant to disturb the ritual quiet, yet eager to learn. You offer corrections in subtle ways, guiding hands, adjusting posture, demonstrating small refinements with the patience that once guided you. Their faces light up with understanding, even as they process the weight of expectation that comes with each bow and fan flick. You feel a profound sense of continuity. The knowledge, discipline, and subtlety are carried forward alive in their hands and eyes, a living testament to the centuries-old art. At night you remove your hair ornaments and carefully wash away the layers of makeup, and the mirror reflects a woman shaped by decades of rigour, sacrifice, and perseverance. The reflection is not just your own, but the embodiment of countless predecessors and the promise of those yet to come. You realise that the life of a geisha is more than performance. It is endurance, mentorship, artistry, and careful negotiation of power. It is a balancing of appearances and realities, of tradition and adaptation, of public perception and private truth. There's a soft satisfaction in this understanding. You have survived, thrived, and guided others to carry forward the discipline, grace, and subtlety that define the art. You've witnessed the evolution of tradition in a changing world, maintained integrity under observation, and preserved the essence of a lineage that spanned centuries. The rhythm of the city, the echo of the shamisen, the movement of the fan, they all affirm the persistence of something larger than individual desire. The tradition endures, fragile yet resilient, silent yet powerful, and you have been an integral part of its living history. As you settle into your futon, the night hums softly around you, the distant sounds of Gion drifting through paper screens. You feel the weight of all you have learned. the legacy you carry, and the continuation of an art form that survives through discipline, precision, and devotion. Every step, every bow, every gesture has mattered. And in this quiet moment, you know that you have become both witness and custodian, a thread in an unbroken chain, and a story still unfolding, rich with the weight of the past and the promise of the future. The room is quiet now, save for the soft creak of the floorboards as the city hums faintly beyond the paper screens. You lie on your futon, the layers of kimono, hairpins, and memories finely loosened, yet their weight lingers in your muscles and in your mind. The night smells of incense and old wood, mixed with the faint chill of the early evening air slipping through the slightly ajar window. You reflect on the long journey, the first uncertain steps as a shikomi, the silent observation of your Onie-san, the rigorous training, the rivalry, the whispered secrets of powerful patrons, the stolen moments of rebellion, the private letters never sent, the devastatingly intimate ritual of mizuage, the fires, the wars, the transformations of tradition in a modern world. Every moment, every lesson, every ache and triumph has led to this calm, this fragile, sacred pause. You think about the apprentices watching you now, their eyes filled with awe and apprehension, learning the language of gestures, silence and presence. You see yourself mirrored in them, the echoes of your own training replaying in new forms, adapted to an era of cameras and global curiosity, yet grounded in the same centuries-old codes. The lineage is unbroken, a living testament to resilience, artistry and subtle power. You feel pride for having survived, adapted, and preserved the essence of geisha life without losing the humanity at its core. The art is not frozen in time, it breathes, evolves, and thrives through the careful cultivation of each generation. Outside, the city continues its rhythm, unaware of the quiet drama and diligence that sustain these rituals. The world watches, often misunderstanding, yet the heart of tradition beats steadily in rooms like this one. You allow yourself a soft smile, acknowledging that your life has been more than performance. It has been stewardship, survival, transmission. In the darkness, the city hums, the lanterns glow faintly, and you drift towards sleep, cradled by history, by art, and by the subtle, enduring power of a life devoted to beauty, precision, and secrecy.